Peace, 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 peace. Welcome to Extreme Radio. I am your host, Matuse. Peace.
And I am your co-host, Abubakr Mahmoud.
Let's just tell you guys a little bit about us. I'm Matuse. I'm an actor, writer, artist, performer. I do like a multitude of things, I guess. But some of the main things is really just the music side and the acting side. But I love to write and I love to research. Bakri, why don't you break down a little bit about who you are?
Okay, I, like my friend here, love to do a whole bunch of things from researching to writing to filming. I'm a journalist by education. I've worked in a whole bunch of things, but really literature and filmmaking have been my driving goals. So I kind of thought this idea of having a podcast would kind of allow us to talk about some of the things that surround our life and how we are.
Exactly. So really what we're trying to create here with the Extreme Radio is a lighthearted way to tackle, I guess, just conversation-wise, some of the things going on in the world that affect not only us, but people in general. And some of the main things we want to talk about are the ways hate speech is used or freedom of speech is used. Obviously, there's two sides to everything. Extremism and the many ways and facets that extremism shows itself, hence the pun of our title, Extreme Radio. Get it. Yeah. And really just trying to look at what's going on in the world today and having a real conversation with two real people who are just coming from their sphere of existence. And Abubakr, we share a lot of things similar, but really it's great when you have different perspectives. And we're going to have some of our co-hosts, some of our dear beloved team from the Raqīb Taskforce, as well as guests and features throughout the weeks. This is the first episode, so this is only an introduction to what it is. Mainly, more than anything, introducing us.
I think although this is our podcast and it's our voice and it's our platform, this is as much as it is about us as it is about our community and the community that we come from, because we are really nothing without our people and who we grow up and where we're from.
Well, that shapes you, doesn't it?
Like, it does, really.
Your environment and the people around you shapes you, which is so interesting because you were saying something earlier about the lenses in which you see the world. Mm-hmm. And it's one thing I've always spoken about, worldviews. You know, growing up, when you grow up and you're young, you kind of think everyone sees the world in the same way you see it. So however it's been presented to you, well, that's the world. But what's interesting, as you get older, you hope that you begin to, I guess, even question certain things. And growing up, a lot of history that we're fed, later on you start finding out things and then you question history. And then it's interesting, they call it his story, or history is written by the victor. And then when you come up with when you start realizing these ideas that certain things are not just one way, and people from all around the world, like when I traveled around the world, one thing I realized was people from all around the world see the world very differently, based again, like you were saying, Abubakr, their environment, their community, their experience. So it's like, well, then if that shapes how you see everything, then worldview is so important because it's going to tell you, or it's going to dictate how you perceive one event. So you and I can have the same event. And I always use this. Let's say we both jumped out of an airplane. We went skydiving. You want to skydive,
yeah,
don't you?
I do.
Okay, I don't want to skydive.
Yeah.
So this is actually a good example.
Okay.
So let's say we both
skydive.
We jump out of a plane. Now we both have our parachutes and everything. So we're ready to jump out of a plane. It's not like some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Your experience of it would be very different to mine.
Yeah, totally. You'll be going through a whole different range of emotions.
Well, what range of emotions would you be going through if you jumped out of
I'd probably be excited, elated, and indifferent in many ways. I'd just be like, there's another thing I'm going to do, and just be super cool about it because it's just how I am.
Super cool about it, yeah. You'll have to force me out of that. You'll have to push me out of that airplane. Like, I'm open to the idea, sort of, but somebody would literally have to push me out.
I don't mind pushing you.
Yeah, you would have to.
Out of love.
Out of love,
like
right. And the whole way down, I'd be cussing you out, probably. But isn't that interesting? We're experiencing the same event.
Yeah.
We're flying or falling
but
out
two
of an
different,
airplane. But two different perspectives.
Because our lenses are different. We're looking at it differently.
Our lenses are different.
It's not the situation is different. It's how you react to it that makes all the difference.
So that really is going to kind of guide our episodes and our show, because really it's all about lens. Like anything we talk about. And I really want to be able to go through as many events and as many things that's going on in the world. And we'll discuss it. We'll research a little bit. And, we're very open about this. And we'll just, through our lenses, kind of discuss certain things. So, I guess it's just a back and forth. What do you want to discuss first?
We should call it show Under the Lens.
Under the Lens.
Okay.
That could be the subtitle for it. Yeah. Extreme Radio, Under the Lens.
Yeah.
So recently, there was the London Tower lit on fire. You see that?
Yeah, that whole building though. I mean, the images were kind of really scary, weren't they?
Images were amazing,
That building
and I mean
was
that
lit,
both ways.
for lack of a better term.
Yeah, it was lit. But what I found, two things I found so interesting, is that when that building was lit up, you know, a lot of the locals, the people who lived there and lived in that
Or
community,
the working class, the struggle.
well, I mean, yeah, they're struggling people, people who already had felt ostracized by that society, that area, because that building was considered an eyesore for all the wealthy people that lived within that area, and so they built this, you know, flimsy plastic structure around it to make it look better, not to ensure that it was better designed, not to ensure that it was safer.
So
but
this
to look
flimsy
better.
construction that they put up, is that what caused the fire?
That's what caused the fire. Because this building has been up for very long. So it's quite an old building. And in the previous 10 years, they had no issues. And then this new construction that they placed around it is only a year old. A year old.
I mean,
and then all of a sudden it gets lit on fire. And, you know, so many people, you know, died and were injured in this. And the locals were saying, this is just another way, an excuse for the, now I'm you know,
I mean, if
reiterating what they're saying, but
Yeah.
that this was like a council type of, you know, agenda to try to, you know.
you think it might have been deliberate?
Well, it's not. I think I'm saying that the locals think that it was
Because
deliberate.
that's, in that case, that's just state-sanctioned murder, is what that is.
Well, of course. I mean, but the idea behind it was, in order for them to have a gentrification. In order for you to
Gentrification
create
to the level
another,
of state-sanctioned murder to gentrify the area.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised they murdered
I
whole
mean, they've done a
continents.
lot of worse things in the
Yeah,
world,
I
right?
know.
So it's so interesting that they were coming out and saying this isn't an accident. This is something that has been intentional. This is something that they've intended to do in order for them to achieve a goal, which is to get rid of this eyesore of a building so they can continue their gentrification. Now, the second thing I wanted to say is big ups to the Muslim community in that area. That area, what area did that happen? I think it was in Birmingham. I'm trying to find out. We got Moe on the other end, and Moe's going to help us find out where it actually happened. We want a little bit of details, Moe, if you can help us out. But what I do know is that a lot of the local Muslims, because there's quite a Muslim population there, they were in the mosques for early morning prayer and to break their, you know, to prepare for their fast for the day. And they saw the fire getting lit. They saw, you know, the fire in the sky, and they were the first ones there. And they were astronomical help. They helped a lot of people escape. They brought a lot of water for those who they brought out, and they've been there on the ground level. And a lot of the locals are saying that, you know, the government hasn't reacted enough. It's kind of like FEMA during Katrina. But the local community, the Muslims, who again are another group being ostracized in that society, were the ones helping. And it's so, in such a negative story, it's just, on a human side, it's so cool seeing humans helping humans.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, because, you know, when everything else is pushed to the wayside, it's like, it's a beautiful thing when you see people trying to help people, regardless of where they're from.
Yeah. I feel like that's not looked at enough. Like, why?
Well, it wasn't. I mean, did you hear about that?
I didn't hear about that. This side of the story never came into
Yeah, you never get to
fruition,
hear
really.
that side of the story.
Yeah.
And that leads into, like, well, since we're speaking of London, within that same week, there was the driver, the truck driver, the bus driver.
Attacked.
He had a van. It was a
They
white van.
kidnapped a woman. And
No, that was in America. This is in England. This man in a van
Oh,
ran
yeah.
over a bunch of worshippers
Yeah.
who just came out of the mosque, and he ran them over. Now, that was very similar to what happened in France, but they called. The difference was the guy who did it in France was a quote unquote Muslim, and he ran over a bunch of people, and they said it was a terrorist attack. And I agree, like, you know, you're
I mean, there's
people.
no surprises in this whole media depiction of people or Muslim
The
being called
double
terrorists. Like, the
standard.
double standard is not something new. It's like,
I want to talk about the
since
double standard.
2001,
Let's
they've been
talk-
calling
'cause-
every Arab person that commits any crime a
Right.
terrorist.
Not just Arabs. Yeah, they are terrorists. You know, any Muslim. But then let's look at the double standard in general. I know the double standard happens a lot when it comes to the black community, the
Yeah.
African American community,
That's true.
or even, you know,
Gender
African
as well.
communities anywhere, you know,
Yeah.
outside of Africa.
Yeah.
So let's talk about double standards in media. You're a journalist.
Uh-huh.
So what is your take on double standards? Is it a legitimate thing? Where does it come from? Why do we have these double standards?
Okay, you got double standards on multiple levels. You can look at how black people are represented in media, and you can also look at how conservatives are represented in media. So the same story, even to not give him a platform, but Mr. Trump, the way he's represented in
Mr.
CNN,
Trump, nice. I like that.
might be very different to how he's represented in Fox, and also Fox, the way they would represent Muslim people is very different to how BBC might represent Muslim people. So this is not something that is kind of hard to point out. A lot of people don't point it out because they rarely look at their media from like a critical lens.
Right.
And that's kind of what you have to do. It's kind of like the market, and it's kind of like everything. You kind of have to look at things from a critical lens and evaluate with relation to your morals as a person if this is right, and if this is this form of communication, for this instance, is effective in what you're trying to achieve.
So it's really something that it's an intentional thing.
It's an intentional thing, but you have exactly. It's very clear cut. But double standards can be really dangerous when people, when certain behavior is very normalized. So when a white guy rapes a woman, and this is not just double standards in media, but double standards in reality,
in society,
society, and then that person gets out of prison 3 months later.
Mm-hmm.
And then is allowed to run the streets, and the media will then ask questions, or the police will ask questions about how he was a star athlete. You know what I mean? There would never. That was an actual thing. They would never question if a black man was a star athlete if he was accused of murder.
The other thing is,
does not matter.
If what I've noticed media-wise, if like let's just say a white guy commits a crime, he's one person who's committed that crime.
The
he
media
represents
is
himself.
really apologetic to white men.
But then if somebody from a minority group,
dear white people,
commits a crime, they represent the whole group. You know, growing up, in the previous 5 years, I've had a lot of people reach out to me. And Abubakr, you tell me if this has happened to you. I've had a lot of people reach out to me via social media, saying to me, you know, why don't the Muslim community do something about this or that, or apologize, or do they condone? And it's this idea that there's this one group of that we all are one group, and I've always found that so strange to me because my group of friends who make up my community are from everywhere in the world and from different beliefs. So there isn't like we all come together and congregate
but
together.
I mean, they have a point. They have a point. Like I recall just like last week, I was just chatting with ISIS. It's like, ISIS, just chill. Like, I condone this. I don't condone it. Like, I don't want you to do these bombings. And you wouldn't believe what they said. They're just like, no, like, go fuck yourself, Bakri. We're going to continue. Yeah, I feel like we can. But as it turns out, ISIS didn't actually care what I had to say, because in reality, we don't actually communicate with extremists. We communicate with you and everyone around us because we live in the same place, in the same location. I don't understand how they feel like, as Muslims, we have this kind of secret, unknown link for communication. Anyway, shall we move on?
No, I really wanted to bring, like, before we do move on the double standard, I found something here. Just like when we talk about double standards and how things, right? So J.K. Rowling, infamous J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, she posted up something on Twitter saying the Mail, so the Mail Online newspaper, has misspelled terrorist as white van driver. Now, let's discuss how he was radicalized. That was her post. Now, what she's referring to is this online article by Mail Online, which its title was, "White Van Driver Injures at Least 10 People After Plowing into a Crowd Outside London's Finsbury Park Mosque, where hate cleric Abu Hamza once preached as Muslims finished their evening prayers." Now, what's very interesting about this statement is that a white van driver, so they don't talk about him, they talk about the color of his van. Yeah. And it's so interesting that he's not referred to as a terrorist, even though what he did on the other end was like what we spoke about before.
It was a terrorist, but it doesn't get depicted as a terrorist.
Yeah, and that the post itself refers back to, in order for them to kind of justify it, they say that it's the same mosque that once upon a time cleric Abu Hamza preached at. So it's like trying to ensure that there's not too much sympathy. And it's really cool when you see people like J.K. Rowling pointing things out like that. The double standard is real. And what I feel is when you perpetuate continuously a double standard via the media, then what you're doing is you're justifying the double standard in society. And over countless periods of time, eventually that becomes standardized, really. Double standard becomes standardized.
Yeah.
So
you travel a lot.
Yep.
These double standards probably affect your life.
I mean, yeah.
How's it like going through New York Airport?
Wow. So, first of all, I love America. America, shout outs. I have a lot of fam and friends there.
Yeah.
Like anywhere else in the world, or many places in the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, double standards are interesting on a human level. Because what they do is on a human level is they affect the average person.
Yeah.
And me going through customs is hard. I have nothing against me. But I feel like every time I go through, my name gets red flagged. I'm very polite there, to the customs officer. They're very happy with me. We having a good chat. And then they type my name in, and then their faces kind of change, right? And then, 9 out of 10 times, they'll tell me to wait, to pull me to the side, and somebody needs to have a conversation with me. They need to question me about things that have happened from things that I've said from 6-7 years ago, just to make sure that everything adds up.
Okay.
And it's interesting because, I'd say it's random if it happened once or twice.
Yeah.
But it's like a constant thing.
Yeah.
And that's a humorous level of double standards.
Yeah.
When you look into the depths of double standards, I was in America during the Trump era when Trump became president. And what that kind of created was this energy that it was now justifiably acceptable to be racist and to be bigoted. And that you had a political justification to do that. That the president now allows certain people, or allows people to now say things and act upon things. And everything starts with words. And when it starts with words, it doesn't seem as powerful. Words are not violent.
Your words are incredibly violent.
Oh, well, they are. But but they're perceived as non-violent. Right? Yeah. And then as words build into ideologies, then they become acted upon.
Yeah. And
that's what I feel is the reality. Growing up for me, if I walked down the street where I lived, if a police car drove by, it would turn around. It would pull up next to me and they would search me. And their justification for that was I fit a description, which was a Middle Eastern man, as vast as that was. Now, imagine a police officer pulls over a white guy and says, you fit the description of a white man.
Yeah, it's interesting what white people can really get away with, and also what speech is allowed in discourse and what is permissible, even if it's incredibly racist, and incredibly manipulative as well. I kind of wanted to leave this for later, but I kind of just wanted to get your opinion on this. It's something that's been bugging me since just earlier this afternoon.
Right.
But I saw this billboard, and it read something along the lines of, the end is nigh, and it had a verse, and it said, read your Bible.
Right.
Like, know your God, convert to Christianity before we all die, and you won't go to hell.
Right.
Basically, this huge, taking up, massive sign on the street, middle of the highway.
Where did you see that? Here in Sydney?
Yeah, here in Sydney, completely on its own. And I'm like, okay, that's very interesting. But imagine that was an Islamic message. If that was just convert to Islam because you'll go to hell otherwise. Just imagine the uproar. It's so funny to think about that. That is straight up. That's scary. I don't want to read that even if it was the case.
I saw a lot of those kind of signs when I was in in the South.
Yeah.
In America.
Yeah.
So Florida, going through and you see some very interesting things, but you're right, because the double standard of what society does accept, and when you perpetuate a double standard continuously, especially through media reporters and people that are in the spotlight, then it becomes acceptable to think in that way without people realizing they are thinking in that way, and not just quote unquote white people, just any people.
Yeah.
We begin to feed into these double standards. I mean, double standards happened with genders.
Yeah,
where
totally. On a whole nother level. That's probably the global double standard.
The global double standard is, gender relations. And it's that's a perfect example of how when you continuously perpetuate this idea, then it becomes the norm.
Yeah.
And the norm affects people on the ground level.
Normalization, for the example of gender, is that it allows two kids to bully each other and one kid to call another kid you throw like a girl, or that you're lesser because you in any way
Right, throw like a girl.
Yeah, you
because
know what I
that
mean?
means that
You're weak. You're
weak, right,
incapable, and
yeah.
it's just so normal for like 8-year-olds to think that way. How can we expect adults to kind of form societies that don't represent that ideology? Our researcher Mo has been giving us information.
What is Mo said?
Well, first of all, he confirmed that the town of which the London fire happened was in North Kensington, in Western of London.
West London. Yeah.
But he's actually going to come in and join us soon to continue.
You know,
this
when you brought that up,
yeah,
you were also referring to another. See, double standard. How does it affect people? Hey, this is perfect. The double standard has affected people to such a point now where Islamophobia, and we're going to run with that. There are other kinds of phobias, you know, aside from arachnophobia, you know, homophobia and whatever. There are many phobias, but right now, Islamophobia is a real thing that is being undermined. You know, the people are not held accountable for this. Now, in America, we were talking about the girl Nabra Hassanin. Right now, she was coming out of a mosque in, I believe, West Virginia, if I can get that checked. And she was coming out of a mosque. And this is the story, right? She came out with a group of her friends, maybe 4 or 5 girls. And this car pulled up with these 2 guys in there. They were white male Americans. They came out of the car with baseball bats, screaming at the girls and chasing them down the street. Now, Nabra, she fell over. She slipped on her dress and she fell on the floor. And they bashed her with the baseball bat. They took her. They kidnapped her. They possibly sexually abused her, and then they killed her and dumped her body in a lake. Now, this hasn't been reported as a terrorist act. This hasn't been seen as a hate crime yet. When it's clearly a hate crime, and hate crimes come from hate speech. Now, the interesting thing
I feel like it's borderline a terrorist attack because something like that is quite terrorism.
No, you know what? It is a terrorist attack, and I'll tell you why. If you study terrorism or the word terrorist, it used to be only used for states. So only a state could be a terrorist. Only states could govern terrorists. So later on, it was kind of perpetuated for groups. Now, there are obviously terrorist groups all around the world, but terrorism doesn't have to be from an organized group. When you terrorize people, by definition, you're a terrorist. And you chasing a group of girls with a baseball bat, then to kill one of them, following abusing her and dumping her body, shows your complete and utter lack of human respect and human dignity. I mean, these are the same things that we are more than openly condemning all around the world from groups like ISIS or whoever you want to name. And I'm not just going to say ISIS, because the reality is terrorist groups today, you know, when people talk about, they say ISIS, if you think ISIS represents Islam, then you'd have to think KKK represents Christianity, which they obviously don't, or the Westboro Church represents Christianity, which they don't. But even so, there are other groups around the world. I know in Africa, in North Africa, there is a group, a Christian group.
The Ugandan.
Yeah, do you know what they call
Freedom?
The Salvation something?
Yeah.
Salvation Fighters. I don't know what their name is. We're gonna find their name, but they are literally on a journey of mass genocide of Muslims. Another group in Burma. Led by Buddhist monks.
Yeah, the extreme Buddhists in Burma.
Buddhists in Burma are killing Muslims.
So
now,
the Rohingya people.
The Rohingya people, yeah. I say that to say this. Extremism leads into terrorism. And terrorism and extremism are not synonymous with one group, regardless of what group you want to term. They are not. And stats and history and today show that. The difference is, and check this out, the difference is what gets perpetuated via media. Because everyone, through their worldview, and this is interesting, we're coming full circle with everything we said, their worldview is built up by what the stimulus that they're fed. So if you're fed these visuals and this media report, and you go online and on your Facebook feed, and on your Instagram and Twitter, you're being fed all of this information that only highlights the acts of radicals who claim to be Muslims, but they do not highlight the acts of radicals who claim to be Buddhist, or claim to be Christian, or claim to be communist, or claim to be whatever they claim to be. Then you are only painting a double standard picture,
Yeah.
especially when you do show via the media stories about these other people,
Yeah.
like the guy, the London guy in the van,
Mhm.
and the case of Nabra, may she rest in peace.
Yeah.
And we don't point these things out, and we don't question where were they radicalized,
Mm.
why were they radicalized,
Mm.
who radicalized them.
Mm.
Like, how does a person like this, how does a human being get to the point where they're comfortable to get into their car and pull up at a mosque and kill a 17-year-old girl? And if you've seen her face, she looks like nothing but pure innocence and just a lovely human being. And to do that indiscriminately, where were you radicalized?
Yeah.
And this is a real question. Why? I'm not against, we have to stop radicalism, period. And if we're, by we, I mean society.
Yeah.
And those who actually are in the position of doing so, in the governments. If we are tackling radicalism, then it seems like the biggest double standard if we're tackling only, quote unquote, Muslim extremism, but we're letting all other forms of extremism slide. I mean, as a human being, not as a Muslim, not as a man, just as a human being, that worries me, because I'm a person who lives in a society, and it matters to me regardless of what group is being targeted, because it doesn't matter what group is being targeted. Eventually, when all groups, if you target enough groups, your group is going to get targeted.
Yeah.
We were saying before, white people, this and that, but the reality is, if we look throughout history, quote unquote, white groups have been targeted as well.
Yeah.
The Irish, they have a long history of being oppressed, being marginalized, and the thing about it is we have to kind of look at
I think
it all on the same page, right?
I think there are two main lenses you got to look through. There's the lens by which you view the world, how you look at the world, and how you take on the world. There's also the lens by which the information that comes into you is looked through. So there's, as you said, the media and all that source of information where we create our knowledge, and there's also the lens that we now flip over and look back onto the world and act towards the world from what we've learned.
Yeah.
And we got to think about what we can change. And now that we've kind of isolated them and like localized them in their own little groupings, you can change the source of information that you get. You can change who you talk to, where you learn,
alternative media,
what kind of media you consume, what kind of books you read, what you do. It really helps to travel. We established that earlier.
Traveling
Like
has
talking
helped
to people.
me,
It really helps you realize your place in existence and actually rereading over your history. And something I wanted to mention earlier with history before we go on to media was that when I was studying history in school and ancient history, like every time black people were brought up, it's like, so they were the slaves and then they got freedom and then they were slaves again. It was always white people acting upon black people. We were always the object. We were never a subject. We never had our own stories, our own tales, our own sources. Right. I never heard of my own history. My history is always talked about and I was always the lesser. And if that creates my perception of who I am as a person, it makes it very challenging to really get ahead and feel confident and find your place and not be bitter about your existence and feel like, I'm so lucky I'm not a slave because I was born 50 years after I was a slave, after my people were slaves for 400 years. Like, I'm just so lucky. Why shouldn't I feel empowered?
So
my history is so deep.
Bigger, longer than slavery. I mean, slavery has affected, I love studying deep, like ancient history. And, slavery has affected many, many groups. In fact, the word slavery comes from Slav or Slavic. So first people with slaves were European.
Really?
Yeah, Slavics, they were the first slaves that we know of, right? Historically. The difference is, what has to be said is, although slavery existed throughout history, most of the time slavery, even in its worst conditions, people weren't stripped of their culture, their heritage, and their name. They were still who they were.
Really?
But the idea of slavery was one group of people fought another group of people, and the group that lost were taken as captives, and generally they were made into servants and slaves, and they were then incorporated into the society they lived in.
Yeah.
But they knew who they were and where they were from. But chattel slavery, which is what happened in the transatlantic slave trade for 400 years, chattel slavery is when you strip a human being of everything that makes them a human being. So then you can then program them to believe that they're not human. They're 3/5 of a man, which is what they taught the African slaves that they took. You're not a full human being. You're part animal, part man. And and then they furthered this with pseudosciences like phrenology. Have you ever heard of phrenology?
Never heard of
Abubakr?
phrenology.
So phrenology was this pseudoscience. Now,
Yeah.
you know what pseudoscience
Yeah.
is? It's a fake science,
Yeah.
right? The pseudoscience, they were trying to describe it as such. They said that if you study the skull of the African man, it is designed, the brain of the African man is designed to be a slave.
Yeah,
And
I've
that
heard
phrenology
actually.
proves this.
Yeah.
They were designed to be subordinate, which is so interesting because what it does is when you strip somebody of who they are and their people and where they're from and how they've come about and been, and their history begins in slavery, then that's all they can identify with. When the reality is these were people who were from, kings and queens, or people who had deep cultural roots. These were people who had a lot
The greatest
about them.
civilizations.
I mean,
man
yeah,
has ever seen.
we know that the out of Africa theory of evolution of people
Yeah.
is that people stem from there. Now, if we stem from there, by and large, then that means that that's all of our history. So how could our history start in slavery?
Yeah.
You understand? Even that's the history of humanity. And again, that's a double standard of knowledge.
Yeah. Yep. If it's written by the victor.
We're gonna take a quick break, and we're gonna bring in Mohammed.
Brother Mo.
We're gonna bring in brother Moe.
Another
and he's-
extreme brother for the show.
extreme brother.
Yeah.
Who's gonna come in and he's gonna join our conversation. So we'll be right back.
All right. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Extreme Radio.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
Abubakr, and I'm joining me today already is Matuse and my brother Mohammed.
What's good, everyone?
Mohammed, I'm gonna call you Al Mayahi from now on because I know you as Al Mayahi, and that's your director.
You
name.
know, I wish more people knew me as Al Mayahi.
They will through this podcast and through the
Hopefully.
great films we're making. I just like to say, Mohammad Al Mayahi and I, we create films together.
They're
and,
on the way. They are on
the way. This year has been very productive for us in that sphere. Speaking of film, Al Mayahi, one of the reasons I wanted to get you in the room with us. I mean, this is going to be a thing. We're going to have you in the room with us.
I'm happy you want me in the room with you
We're
boys.
going to have you in the room quite often. We like having your presence.
Um,
Is the power of film. Now, we were speaking about double standards and worldview lenses and how...
lenses, I know about those.
Yeah, you know a lot about lenses. And how lenses are kind of built up based on what you... the kind of stimulus and environment you're based in and what you listen to and what you hear. And me coming from a spiritual background, I know that what we take on board... So negative things have lower frequencies and positive things have higher frequencies. And how they affect your mind, how they affect your soul, right? So on a mental sphere of it, when you take things on board, they affect how you see things. Now, there was this documentary that was made. It was called Real Arabs.
Real Bad Arabs.
Is that what it's
Yeah,
called?
yeah, it
Now,
was
it's real as in R-E-E-L.
as in a film reel.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And it was about the previous 50 to 60 years of how Arabs had been perpetuated and shown or stereotyped
Yeah,
in
of
Hollywood.
course.
And what
Got a
the
whole bunch of
All you gotta watch
examples.
is Indiana Jones,
Right.
and
Or
you'll
Aladdin.
see. Oh, you
so,
see, yeah.
So what it was doing was showing that over time, there's been this slow, transient development of this idea of what a angry, savage Arab man
Yeah, and you
is,
know the
a
thing
submissive
with
woman.
that is like it's a Hollywood thing. It isn't a film thing. You
No,
know?
of course not.
Yeah.
Of course it's not a film thing, but
it's quite interesting.
it's something that
it
they
is.
use
It's
via
the
film.
American image of what an Arab person looks like. It's like, say for example, if you watch some Iranian films, right,
Yeah.
and you watch a movie like Taste the Cherry. Taste the Cherry has no references to Arabs looking like that or acting like that, or even Iranians looking like that or acting, Middle Easterners.
Mhm.
It's got Afghanis in it as well. It's just really interesting that it's sold, even with the women that are in the lead women in Hollywood films. The way it's sold is it's sold as something. It's like for men. It's kind of for men
Right,
who are
right.
childish, like minded. But we all buy into it. We all buy into the Indiana Jones. We all buy into
Well,
the
that's what
Star
they're saying,
Wars.
though,
You
that
know?
it isn't like an affront. So it isn't something that happens once where you are forced to either agree or disagree. It's a slowly perpetuated thing where subconsciously
Yeah, you learn to
begin
accept it.
to accept this idea,
Yeah.
so that 50 years down the track, when you see Syrians being bombed and killed, you kind of feel bad, but not as much.
Yeah,
Because,
yeah.
you know, film has kind of taught you, or, you know, Hollywood films have taught you not to. And, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not just going to say it's about Arabs. They do the same thing with quote-unquote black people and how they present them through film, playing stereotypes.
African
Well,
people.
okay, so you're saying this. I mean, even you saying African people
Yes.
is interesting in
Yes.
the sphere of it, because we were talking about before, in between our break, we were talking about black and white being used as references for people, and that the references of how we identify people as colors is
Yeah,
a
that's
very
so weird.
new age
Yeah,
nuance.
it is.
I mean, especially with the terms of black and white being that they're not even colors.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah, I
like,
get you.
like in an
Yeah,
art sphere
yeah.
of things, right? And historically, if you were even going to refer to quote unquote white people, they were referred to as red.
Yes. Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And-
We've
and
talked about this before.
We have, yeah. And so I always find it, and I'm guilty of using the terminology because, again, worldview and how we've been shaped and how words have a lot of power, and we get raised using certain words, and but how the idea of like the word white to symbolize people of a European ethnicity is it like boxes everyone in this one term, and the word black boxes people in this one term, and it's just these terms they degrade. Here's the thing that I read that was very interesting to me, that these terms, why they're so poisonous, is they degrade, and obviously get your point of views on this, but they take away from what identifies a human being, i.e. their heritage or nationality or culture or community,
And
you know,
who they are
because-
currently as well.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I never think of like, I am an Iraqi, you know, like, I've descended from so many places in the world, but I think of myself as Australian.
Yeah.
Even though, like, and the idea of an Australian is a European man. Why? Maybe because the Europeans took over Australia and you know what I mean? But when I look at myself, and for a while I was conflicted about this, you know, I was like, what am I? What am I? It's like this existential thing that's happening in your
How
mind.
you identify it.
Yeah, like, what am I? I'm so conflicted.
So
Am I?
important to be able to identify.
Because they tell you what an Australian is this person, or, you know, we took Australia.
Can you guys, has this ever happened to you? Has anyone ever told you to go home? And then and they didn't mean like back to Fairfield or back to the area you're from.
I doesn't get back to where you came from.
It happened. Yeah, it's happened to me multiple times, but this one time it happened to me. This is how like innocent my mind state was at that point.
Yeah.
This guy was screaming at me, and he was screaming at my mother, and he's cussing us out, and he's screaming, "Go home!" And I'm like, "You go home." And I just took it like he meant like, you know, you're
Go back
heated
to
up,
your house.
go back to your house. Until it trickled in my head like he meant leave the country. Look, I'm born here.
Yeah.
And if a British descendant person,
Yeah.
I'm gonna use white,
Yeah.
has the right to call this home, then I sure as
You
hell
have the
do
right.
too.
Yeah, of
because
course,
unless you're
of
an
course.
indigenous person of this land, you have no right. In fact, you have less right, in my eyes, to tell anyone to leave when you came brutalizing the people.
I mean, even the
Like-
indigenous people had come into this land. You know what I
I
mean?
mean, that's irrelevant though, because they came such a long
I mean,
time
it's
ago.
true.
being,
it's
being
true.
that they're indigenous means that they are
They
people
are-
of this land.
Yeah.
As in, like, before them, there's no record whatsoever of any
Yeah.
other beings
Human history
here.
is irrelevant.
So this is
unless
their
we're
land,
talking-
you know, and which is interesting because I teach, and one of my indigenous students came up to me, my Aboriginal students, and recently we had created like a song, and I did it with the Kuri kids, so we created this song about community and identifying, and I told them it's important that within the song, even though it's a song about identifying with your community and the school community, that it's important that they also identify with their heritage because it's a big thing, you know, and so
And these guys are from where? These students?
they're Aboriginal.
Oh, okay.
Right now, you guys probably know that they get like certain things from the government. So she got like a laptop, and she came to me the other day, and she said to me, a couple of the students, non-Aboriginal students, said to her, "Why do you have a laptop and we don't have a laptop?" And then one of the other students said, "Oh, is it because?" And he used inverted like commas. He said, "It's because you're Aboriginal." right? And so she came to
Wait,
me.
she said that to the students?
No. The students said that to her.
Oh, okay.
They said, "Why do you have it? Is it because you're quote unquote Aboriginal?"
Mm.
And it kind of affected her as it would. And she came to me about it, and I said to her, "Listen, they're ignorant." And again, it comes back to worldviews. I said they're ignorant. They're not racist because they don't even understand it.
It's
yet.
just that lens they have on, I
The
guess.
lens they have on, and it's something that needs to be tackled. And I said to her, I said, "Listen, you deserve more than a laptop. Trust me.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting us even be here on your land, because that's the reality."
I mean, thing is, we're saying thank you for letting us be here in our land. It's like when you take something from someone and be like, thanks for the gift. It wasn't really gifted to you.
I agree with you, but I mean it as an individual. And I didn't take anything from anyone. I was born here, and my parents came here.
So what, we owe them that fact? Like,
I mean,
a
a lot of people are owed a lot of things. I feel I'm a supporter of reparations for slavery,
100%
reparations for colonization,
definitely,
reparations for building the railroads, for building prisons, for stolen generations.
Yep.
All these things should be given back and then some. Really, we should just cede
given
power. I mean, that's as far as I want to go, but like that's just my view. I don't feel I deserve any power that I have.
But that's the thing. It's not a deserving. I mean, to add to that, because that's an really interesting point. It's not about deserving, or it's not about being gifted. I'm born in this country, so there's nothing I can do about being born somewhere. If I was born here, regardless of British colonialism, I'd be accepted as part of this landmass. But respecting the fact that this landmass is a landmass that is culturally and inherited by a group of people.
You just have to respect the history and what's happened. You
just have to realize that you're born either with more equality or less equality than other people.
You mean privilege?
Privilege, more or less privilege.
Levels of privilege, right?
Levels of privilege, right? You can't be like, oh, I'm born here, I'm innocent of all things. No, like you're born with a great deal of privilege, and you have that power at your hand. It's your choice what you do with it. You can't be like, oh, I didn't choose how this world came to be. It's just the way the cookie crumbles. It's like you are now kind of continuing the game. And what are you doing with your cards?
Isn't it that one of the things that through discussion I've noticed that when people feel like in our society, the people who have the most privilege, I guess, are those who are born of European and British descent, right?
Yeah.
The most privilege. Now, that comes, again, being born into a society, it's not your fault, right? So there's an element of guilt. It's like, well, why should they feel guilt? And I think it's important that it's not about the guilt. Rather, it's about, well, what do you do with your privilege? Testifies to how guilty you should really feel. Like, if you take your privilege and you do nothing with it.
I mean, you might be on a healthy pursuit to kind of compensate for your privilege, but it's very easy for people to very quickly start to absolve themselves. Be like, you know what, I try. I work hard. And I'm tired of people thinking that I am privileged because I'm white. People can say racist things to me too. I'm like, yeah, people can say racist things to you all night long, but you'll never be born into the same situation that someone else is born. You'll never live the life of a black person.
When you said that they can experience racism, that comes back to the idea of the double standard, because if you experience racism, but you're the majority, the racism is never perpetuated on a grand scale that actually affects your livelihood and your experience of living in the way you live. What I mean by that is, if somebody is racist to one person who is the European descent, that person, that's not a state racism. That's not
exactly. That's not
when they
institutional
go for a job,
racism. White people cannot experience institutional racism.
And I guess that's the point that people make about the
Europeans,
differences,
bro.
Well, Al Mayahi hates the term white. And
I think it's because I'm Arab
fence.
though. Like I think like the way the Arabs have seen it is it's never been about white and black, because that's really an American idea. And you look at like how it's affected even people living in the South, like in the South, like
South of where?
South of America.
South America or south of the United States of America?
Of the United States of America.
Just being clear.
Yes. It's just like you look at the people, and it's like the African Americans are completely segregated away from the Europeans, and they just don't go into each other's places. You know what I mean?
I mean, maybe we should, as much as we like to think about how there are double standards with European descent people or white people and how they're treated and represented in society, we kind of have to look at the privilege that's given to ethnic people and how we use the privilege that we have. So we
What's
can't
that
we
privilege?
can't be like, okay, you white people, you got to do this. You're not doing enough.
No,
We
everyone.
got to be thinking about,
100%.
what can we do? Are we doing enough? What? Because where we sit in this room, like we're all ethnic people. We're not European descent, but we still all have a great deal of privilege. We still get to just be here and be in our freedom. And
When you
know what
say
I mean?
privilege, and I'm not disagreeing with you, I do agree. But when you say we all have privilege, what privilege is that? Privilege compared to who? You mean
Okay.
to the world scale?
to world scale, to
Yeah.
local scale, compared to the people who originally own this location right over here,
Yeah.
you know. And I hate kind of talking about this, the ancient people. No, they're just here. They just they
they
live next
still
door.
live in
But
here,
like
bro.
they are born into poverty. We're not. We're born with opportunity. We're not born with very high imprisonment rates. We're not born with likely to have alcohol fetus syndrome. I gotta look that one up. All these issues we're born free of. Like we're born with the option to go get an education, to get employment, and all these things. And it's all built
100%.
upon someone else's freedom. I don't believe that freedom just exists. I feel
No,
like
it
it's
doesn't.
marketed,
Freedom
bought, and
in
sold.
itself is a
People
privilege,
have
I
to
guess, you know, the
give
way
and
society
take.
looks. Okay, I agree. So we do have this, but you said something about we're born. I can only use me as an example.
Yeah.
And you say we're born completely free from poverty and prejudice.
Yeah. Well, not
Not
born
prejudice.
free
You didn't
from
say
prejudice and
prejudice,
poverty
but
even.
but you like as in to be able to advance.
Yeah.
Now, when I grew up, I faced racism
Yeah.
constantly.
Yeah.
In the workforce.
Mhm.
In fact, I studied journalism.
Yeah.
And most of my friends, they got caught up in doing a lot of negative things because of the environment that they were raised in. I grew up in an area that was low socioeconomic. It
Same.
was the norm was to become a drug dealer.
Yeah.
The norm was to get involved in the streets.
Mhm.
And I chose to try my best to avoid it. I got 2 degrees to my name.
Yeah.
One of those degrees was a journalism degree.
Yeah.
I worked at the Daily Telegraph for a while. I was an
Really?
intern for 2 years there under the promise of a job.
Yeah.
By the head editor.
Yeah.
The job, right before my degree was done.
Yeah.
So what the idea was, I'd finish off the final year of my degree, and then I'd work full time.
Yeah.
But I was there every week. So when I was in at university, I'd be there, usually the weekends.
Yeah.
Now I wrote an article because obviously I was there for a little while. They gave me some freedoms,
Yeah.
some privileges, if you
Yeah.
may. And I wrote an article, and one of the articles was an opinion column, and it was about, at that point, a London terror bombing.
Yeah.
And I wrote, and I stand by what I wrote. I wrote that we have to, first of all, from my perspective, being on a train and feeling uneasy about something that had happened, and it could happen even here.
Yeah.
And then noticing that everyone's looking at me like I'm the one they're uneasy about.
Yeah.
And it's like the double whammy of you yourself, you're innocent, and you can be a victim of it just like anyone, but they're looking at you as the suspect as well. And then I wrote this article saying we have to stand out against all forms of terrorism, even state-governed terrorism, like what's happening to people like the Palestinian people. That didn't slide well. And Piers Ackerman, I don't know if you guys know who he is, he pretty much has complete freedom and autonomy to say whatever he wants. He writes opinion columns, and he throws people under the bus on a weekly basis. He brought me into his office, and he had his lawyer there, and he berated me for what I wrote, and he said that I was ignorant, that the school system failed me, my family failed me, and I was an idiot. And then he said, I'm going to write this in my next opinion column. And he did. And he said by name, he put me by name in his column saying what he said. My family failed me.
Yeah.
The school system failed me.
Yeah.
Society failed me. And my perceptions of the world were twisted because of what I said about the Palestinian people.
Yeah.
Now, that job that was pretty much guaranteed to me. Now, my internship had finished, and I was ready to start working. My degree had finished as well.
They never
In the
gave
coming
you the
weeks,
job.
the head editor said to me, listen, there's nothing opened right now, but as soon as an opening, you're the first person in.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, just do the articles, just do like rate music. So I come in, I'd get CDs, I'd review them. So 2 weeks in, I'm in there, and I've got these CDs, and I'm reviewing them. And I noticed this girl, she's Anglo-Saxon. She was there in my final 2 weeks there. Now, most internships only go for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
My one was elongated.
Yeah.
But most of them go for 2 weeks. So when I saw her there, still at her table, this is 3-4 weeks in, I said to her, wow, like, have they extended your internship?
Yeah.
She said, no, they gave me a job.
Oh, wow.
Mind you, she was only there 2 weeks beforehand.
Yeah,
I'd been
that's
there for
fucked
over
up.
a year.
Yeah. I mean,
And
that's-
my job was taken
what job?
from me.
Your actual job.
My job was
to
given
this
someone else
girl.
because I rubbed the wrong person.
Yeah.
Now, when you talk about privileges, at that point, I'll be honest with you, at that point in my life, I looked at myself and I thought, I worked my butt off against the odds of my friends who were drug dealing and doing this and that. And I said, no, I don't believe in that. I'm gonna strive.
Yeah.
And I strove.
Yeah.
Strove is a word? I strived. Sorry.
Yeah.
I strived.
Yeah.
And in that, what I realized at that point was, well, I should have just sold drugs.
Yeah, you should have just sold
Like,
drugs.
what was the whole point of this? Now, I
Yeah.
didn't go
Whole
sell
story.
drugs. I went back to university. Right, so I made the better decision.
You
I
go to
got a
university
degree.
and then sell drugs.
You can sell drugs at university. Yeah.
But so what it taught me was, one of the things about that is there are levels of privilege, and I'll state that clearly, and what an Aboriginal person goes through in this country compared to what I go through is very different. They go through far worse. But I won't let anyone take away.
I'm not
my
trying to
stuff.
take
No,
away
I'm not
from
saying
your
you are.
suffering.
All I'm saying is that I know not just me, but many people. And
Yeah,
Abubakr,
man.
with a
Yeah.
name like Abubakr,
Yeah.
maybe you can relate to this. If you were to go for a job
Yeah.
and you send in your resume and your name on your resume is Abubakr, that's going to affect you getting a job. Now, that's
Yeah,
not a
100%.
theory. That's a fact.
Yeah.
They've done tests on this where people have sent in the same person,
Yep, yep.
Moe,
Mm.
you know, somebody changed his name to Mo or Mohammed or Joe even, then Yusuf, you know, all of these variations in order for you to fit in. And aside from that, I know people who they've started work and the boss is like, your name's too hard to pronounce. We're just going to, they'll give them a different
Yeah.
name.
Yeah, that's kind of weird, isn't it? Like they just give you a different
They
name.
have no right to do that. That undermines your heritage and who you are as a person.
Yeah,
And
that's
my
how you
point
steal
being
culture,
is-
isn't it?
Exactly how you steal culture. So
Mm.
my point in saying that is there are levels to this. So
Erase-
I want to discuss this idea of, I want you to say, Abubakr, what you mean by ethnic privilege, because I'm not saying it isn't. I just wanted to have that as a footnote before we go into that.
I kind of just look at things in power structures, and
Right.
I look at it in relation to history and how. So, who are you a product of? Where is your place in society? Where's your starting line? What ticket were you given in the lottery of birth?
Yeah, in the lottery of birth, I like that.
You know what I mean?
So
I
true.
think we're all just giving different tickets. It's like, oh, okay, I have this much to work with. What am I going to do with it? So we came, after World War One, after World War Two, maybe decades after all the massacres and genocides happened, right?
You mean us being born?
It's being born after European colonization. We're still a colony of England, right?
Yeah.
So we got the best of it, but in a modern world, where we get the latest and best technology, and we're wealthy, and we're lucky. There's a
You
huge
mean we
small
were born
population.
into this?
We
Yeah.
were born into this,
I don't know if I was born into that.
but you got there though, right?
Yeah,
You
I
were born-
eventually
You weren't born
got
into it,
there.
but like, what
Okay.
odds you could have been born?
I was born in the middle of the war, bro. I
Yeah,
was born. So what happened to me was I was in Iraq. My parents moved to Iran. We were living there illegally, and then I was born there. We ended up having to take a boat all the way to Australia,
Wow.
and then you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
so.
So within this room, there's just a variance.
I mean,
of
I'm probably the
experiences.
most privileged person here, and I'm the blackest person in this room, which is kind of unique for Australia. If this was America, it would be maybe a different case.
Maybe, yeah,
But
definitely.
and that's only
That's
because, like, unlike you, I came on a plane, and that's like
So you came on a plane. So were
Yeah.
you born somewhere else?
I was born in Sudan. I was born in like a house as big as the studio.
Right. So
Yeah.
I was born here.
All right.
Yeah, so
You're
I'm the
most
only one
Australian.
born here,
Yeah,
right?
right.
That's cool. That's so
There you go.
interesting. And then what's so interesting about that is I was born here,
Yeah.
but I've faced so much discrimination about not being from here.
Yeah,
that
right.
Yeah.
By the age of 16, and shout outs to my mother, who wasn't born here, but who used to always tell me and my brother and I, you're Australian, you're Australian, you're Australian. Don't let anyone take that from you.
How
Because
interesting.
I was saying to her, no, I'm not.
Hmm.
I go outside and I don't get treated like anyone else.
Yeah.
So it became where I didn't want to identify with anything anymore.
Yeah.
So when people would say to me, what's your nationality? I'd say I'm a human being. And that was my way of
It's kinda
owning
sad,
the
though.
fact. It is sad.
Yeah.
But it was my way of owning the fact that, well, I don't fit in because I'm not Arab either.
Yeah.
I'm not Lebanese. I've gone to Lebanon. And when I was in Lebanon, I didn't fit in.
Yeah, when I went back to Iraq, it's just like
didn't fit
I
in.
was not Iraqi anymore.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
You're Iraqi when you're not
Oh,
there,
yeah.
but once you're there, you're all
Yeah,
of a
you're
sudden you're
like-
like, hold up a minute.
I don't fit into this place. Like,
So
what's
who
going
are
on?
you?
Yeah, exactly.
And that in itself,
You're a complex person with
That's
like,
exactly it.
multiple
Everyone
But
is.
I feel like all these multiple assets that come into your identity, I feel like they can all be broken down. I feel like people just don't want to think about it in deeply. You can analyze all the things that make you who you are and all the elements in your life. I feel like we can really evaluate why the world it is, why we have our differences. We always think about how, oh, we're in a catastrophe. How do we solve this catastrophe? Why don't we think about our fundamental differences as human beings? What is it that kind of separates us, we can evaluate all of this. We can figure out, okay, the reason I'm bitter with you as a Macedonian man is because my grandpa was killed by you because they were in the Serbian army or whatever. And this happened because these people invaded these people. And I think this way because this is the media that tells us this much. But like, we can evaluate all these things. I feel like we're too busy thinking, oh my God, what do we do now? This is the end of the line. No, we can work our way backwards.
But Abubakr, I would say that you're an intelligent person who is educated.
Yeah.
So you have privileges in education and
much.
Intelligence, and you don't have, I can't speak on your family, but you don't have an upbringing where you're taught to about the other side, as into the hate the other side, or some people, they grow up with like they have these things that are, I agree, like historically they've held on to. And if we all kind of sat down, as the whole world sat down and was like, all right, let's just clear the air, guys. We're not going backwards, let's go forward.
It's funny you say that, because when I was raised, I wasn't told to be Australian. I was very much reminded that I was Sudanese.
Right.
Yeah, my parents are very much against embracing. The Khawaja is the term that they use, and it means foreigner.
Right.
So in here, when we're talking about Australian people, we call them foreigners. We call them outsiders, randoms. We don't like them. We don't engage with them.
Right.
Do not bring home a white girl. You know what I mean?
A European girl.
A European girl. All right,
come on, bro.
Whatever, man.
So interesting.
That's cool.
My sister's married to a British descended person.
Yeah,
a white
I've seen
Australian.
him.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm from a family of very accepting, and that's why I'm very accepting as well. But in saying that, so it's interesting that you didn't come out that way. But in saying that, a lot of people don't have that liberty. Now, especially, I wanted to bring this up, especially because we're talking about this.
Yeah.
There are some people who, like me, struggle with identity.
Yeah.
And they don't identify in this country, and they don't necessarily identify nationalistically anywhere else. But they do identify with a struggle, and they do identify with perhaps an idea. So on many facets, I'm going to give you two ways of looking at this. Somebody who self-radicalizes, and what I mean is they go online and they feed themselves a bunch of an agenda or a narrative that suits their aggression, their anger, justifies their hate for the other side, because the other side from their birth. Like, I use myself as an example. I grew up and I was always berated, but I had a guy come up to me back in the days when Bilal Scaff, I don't know if you guys remember him, he did 40, 50 years in jail for orchestrating a gang rape, and he deserved all the time he got. Double standard again, because there were other people who were not Arab who did heinous crimes as much or worse, and they didn't get those kind of time, but that's irrelevant. But when he was on the newspaper cover, they had a picture of him with a gun, and it said animal on top. Now, an old man walked up to me while I was at the train station, and he shoved the paper in my face, and he said, "That's what you are. That's what you are. You're an animal." And that kind of affected me, because he boxed me in
into something that you're not.
Yeah. And that's just one example that happened constantly. Now, if that happens constantly to you, you begin to think, well, no, I am not an Australian. No, I don't agree with these people. And no, they don't like me. Now, if they don't like me, why should I like them? Now, imagine, then you have someone on the other side telling you, yeah, they don't like you. Yeah. Don't you see how much they don't like you?
Exactly.
Fight them.
Yeah, 100%.
Now, that's how you open. Now, I believe, personal opinion, but based on what I've researched, that's one way that you open floodgates for people to become radicalized.
Because they have a lack of identity in place.
Yeah, when you don't identify, and
like
you're constantly reminded that not only do you not identify, but you're the enemy, then you eventually become the enemy. In the same way, if somebody keeps calling you a criminal, you might eventually just steal. You know what I mean? Because you know, and people say no, there's no way. That's not an excuse. But here's the reality: words. We said it before. Words have power.
And people are weak, man. People are.
I'm not. Yeah, they are weak. But let's not degrade people.
No, it's not about like degrading them. It's just about like we're emotional creatures. You know what I mean? And when we feel a certain way, we'll break. Like we all break.
Yeah. Right.
Just moving be away from the mic.
Oh, my bad.
We do break. But Al Mayahi. What about the fact that if somebody keeps using words, and words have power, and they perpetuate these things? Now, I'll give you an example that no one can really disagree with. If you have a household where the man in the house domestically abuses verbally the woman and the children, that's going to affect their psychology.
Yeah, 100%.
How they see themselves and how they grow,
syndrome.
right? Yeah. Right? So that's a fact. We know this. Anyone disputes this, it's kind of like, well, I mean, do your research.
Socialization 101.
Yeah. So now, if we can accept it in that sphere, then why is it seen so why are people so oblivious to how that could actually have an effect on young, impressionable,
Yeah.
weak? I'll give you that word, Al Mayahi. Weak, young, impressionable, weak young men and women who grow up in a society that they feel disenfranchised.
Yeah.
And then they're fed. They see these double standards.
Do you
they
think
see
it's
everything we see.
education?
I agree, and like with what you say, but I just kind of want to take a moment to point out that there are people who experience these things where they have abusive parents and see their parents abusing each other verbally, physically, everything, but they come out strong, dedicated, amazing people.
Yeah, yeah.
And
100%.
they're not necessarily
Yeah.
destroyed or
Abubakr,
ruined or
I grew
incapable
up
or
with a lack of
vulnerable.
identity.
Yeah.
You
Use
know?
that
And
as
I
armor.
I didn't grow up, hating the other side.
And he
I
didn't
said, there's
become
no
a drug
side.
dealer.
No, it
And I
didn't.
didn't become a drug dealer either.
Hateful, man.
Plenty of opportunity too. Trust.
Yeah, there you go.
But I didn't, because that's something, but I'm not going to use me as the benchmark, because
Yeah.
that's unfair.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, I'm not bigging myself up. I'm just saying my personal experience.
Yeah.
Perhaps there were other things in my life that helped me.
We all have
You know what I
different
mean?
thresholds of pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we all get different stimulus. So if somebody grows up and that's all that they're receiving in their lens, that's all they see of their world.
Yeah, like I was reading about Malala,
Yeah, the Pakistani girl,
Pakistani
yeah.
girl, right? She grew up in a town where the Taliban was starting to take over, right? And they eventually, what they first came in with was like this kindness, this idea of kindness. Like, oh yeah, we're just reintroducing Islam and we're going to make the country an Islamic place again. Yeah, we're falling off because the Western countries are influencing us, yada, yada. They're just playing the blame game. And then eventually they go, okay, no more education for women.
Right.
No more this.
Where-
Women,
how is that
women,
Islamic?
The West the whole way,
Yeah.
and the West uses the East as a scapegoat for their radical views, like how fascism goes. And
so
how
they did exactly what the
totalitarianism
West
goes.
was doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But like, why
The
is that?
blame game.
Why is that though? It's because the education that those people had was very minimal. And like, even here, we do know how to read and write, but people don't want to read. People don't think that's
Oh,
beneficial.
I mean,
Yeah,
hey,
there
you know what
isn't a
you're
culture
saying?
for
Yes,
education.
the culture.
Yeah.
And that's a thing, because, my students, they'll have their phones out all day.
Bro, what are
And
they
they'll be on
scrolling
Google,
through? They're scrolling through Instagram and eating
Instagram,
rubbish.
Facebook,
You know what
Twitter,
I mean?
whatever it is, rubbish. And then they'll say to me, "So how do I spell this word?" I'm like, "You have a phone that you've been on. Oh, period. Go on and write the word in and see how you spell it. Go
It's
on and look up the
interesting,
dictionary."
man.
Because that's the thing. Even though people have access to information, they don't know how to access information, because they're not.
Yeah.
Two things: they're not fed the way to do it,
Yeah,
or that's what you should use it for.
yeah.
And then the second aspect of it is we live in a culture that downgrades and mocks the idea of being educated.
Yeah, very, very much. Like, it's like,
so you don't learn,
bro, the
until
girl
you're
was
stuck
shot.
in the system.
The girl was shot in the face for fighting for education in her country.
Yeah.
Why? Because if she got the people to be educated and the women to be educated, the women would be able to rise and the men would be able to rise. What would that mean? That would mean less power to the Taliban, less power to these militant extremists, And even here in this country, we have militant extremists, you know what I mean? We have
Talk about
the
it.
armies. We have, like, people go, oh yeah, I want to join the army. It's like, why do you want to go and kill people? Like,
One thing I've always found funny is that if you join an army, and pretty much any army in the world, you don't pay for your education to learn how to kill people.
yeah, they
But if
pay
you
for
want to
you.
heal people or save people,
Yeah,
you
you
become a
pay
doctor.
millions to learn how
you
to
gotta
do
learn
good in
that.
the world.
That's
Yep.
so weird,
Yeah,
right? Well, it's not weird.
but you're
it's,
paid
it's
to
telling of
destroy.
what it is. And I was watching a lecture recently that was showing how historically, in the golden age of many places, so what they used to present, at celebrations is cultural or artistic endeavors, showing what that country or that nationality or that group of people were able to achieve. And nowadays we have these parades for weapons.
Yeah.
Like they parade weapons.
Mm.
They bring out the big nuclear bomb.
The
they bring
tanks.
out the army with the tanks, and
Yeah.
we're parading how good we can kill the other side.
Yeah.
And so,
In the name of freedom and
in
independence.
the name of whatever it is, because I'm not talking about one country. I'm talking about all around the world.
Yeah.
You see this.
It's classic.
And freedom is a code word for getting your oil. So
Yeah.
but
Bro, I don't. Man, like being from Iraq and like literally hearing my family tell me that it's normal to hear explosions and it's become a normal thing to hear bombs going off in the background and machine guns being fired. Like when I was there in 2007, that was what was happening, and it's just so strange that's become the norm there. Like when I got back here, I was traumatized from that experience. I was like, what? Like, how did they think that was normal? But like, you feed it enough to people, and they start to agree with it. And that's the same thing with education, and that's the same thing with movies, for example. You give it enough to the people. You spoon feed them it. Spoon feed them it.
Yep.
And they just start to accept it, no matter how bitter it is. You know, they take the pill.
What did Hitler say? He said, make it simple, make the lie simple, say it as many times as you can, and it becomes the truth. And that's why words have power. Because I always like to use in the West we really know the story of the Holocaust, and so I like to use the Holocaust in Germany because it's not the only genocide or Holocaust that existed. But the Holocaust in Germany. As an example of how something that begins with just words, just double standards, just propaganda. In the same way, and I don't think I'm reaching and saying this, but in the same way that Muslims presented
I want to use an example
in
for
the
this
media,
explaining it.
They did this, right? And they pushed this for a couple of years to just slowly perpetuate this idea that the Jews were the fault of society's ills, that the Jews were plotting and planning against us, that the Jews ate the babies and the Jews did this and that.
Yeah, it's messed up, man.
Really crazy ideas, but they fed it into society long enough.
The Jews ate the babies.
That's one of the things that they
what the fuck?
The Jews eat babies to give them power, whatever, right? And so they push this idea long enough, and then people hold on to it. And then they believe it. And then when you then act on a physical action, like rounding them up and putting them in ghettos, people, even though they might feel some kind of way about it,
they're okay with it.
They're okay
like,
a lot more.
Yeah, but the Jews ate the babies.
But the Jews ate the babies.
Yeah.
So maybe they deserve to be put in the ghettos, right? So in the same way, like one of the worst things you can ever do is read like the comment section on anything, right? Comment sections are terrible. But it's crazy.
People go hard on the comment
really
section.
But what's scary is sometimes you read comment sections about atrocities that happen in the Middle East, and people are like, yeah, kill them all, they deserve it anyway.
I read, bro.
That's when you see people's true colors. It's like, you're a despicable human being. But
and it's probably like they would never say that out loud or in front.
Wouldn't.
Like, but they say it behind the keyboard.
But
why?
Why?
Because
they feel comfortable, right?
They feel comfortable.
But there was a journalist. I think we should try to find his name. There was a journalist, a UK journalist, and he posted a bunch of tweets.
Yeah.
And he took quotes from Mein Kampf. Now, Mein Kampf was the book that Hitler wrote.
Yeah. My Struggle, Mein
Kampf. Yeah. And he wrote, and it became like the manifesto for neo-Nazis.
Yep.
Now he took quotes from that. And he just changed. He didn't change anything other than the word Jews.
Yeah.
And he put in place of it Muslims.
Yeah. Right.
And then immigrants or refugees. And then he posted these up.
Yeah.
And the amount of people that retweeted, like, yes, I agree with this, was shocking.
Yeah.
In the thousands.
You have to present.
Now, then later he posted up saying everything I just posted they were quotes from Hitler about the Jews. If you retweeted this and you lived in those times, you would have been okay with the genocide of the Jews.
Yeah, man. I mean, a lot of shit's happened, bro. Like,
You know what he's done there? He's identified their hate. He's pinpointed it. He's like, this is the physical manifestation of the hate that lives within you. It's not just this thing in discourse where some people are like on fringe. Okay, I feel like, and this is very relevant to current politics, where people feel empowered to say hateful things. People feel like, okay, now that my worldview, as wrong as it is normalized, as you said, through continuing the same lie over and over again, I can act on that. I can continue this kind of language in public domain as something that's normal. You know what I mean? I can continue to
like I seen something like that. Like some guy went up and he was reading quotes from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And he was reading these quotes to people, and he was saying it wasn't the Prophet. He was saying it was from Jesus, peace be upon him.
Yeah.
And people were like, "Yep, that's Jesus."
Yeah,
that's Jesus.
That's Jesus. And
then
when
you
you
know
say
what I mean? You go to them, no, that's actually Muhammad, peace be upon him. And you're like,
so then what's the ills of education? We're talking about Mayahi, you were saying that people need education, which I fully agree with.
Yeah.
But in saying that as well, people need education. But there are groups of people, and they're usually the most violent or the most willing to become violent. Who, especially, I've seen this with right-wing groups in England, right-wing extremists, and they're extremist groups, and who radicalized them? No one questions that, right?
Yeah.
But an imam would come to them, the EDL, I think there was the EDL, and this imam who's like a spiritual teacher, sheikh, he came to them. He's trying to, answer questions and show them, look, this is the face of a Muslim.
Is that the Tommy Robinson thing?
He was an ex right-wing radical, was he?
Yeah, isn't he still a right-wing radical?
No.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Yeah, with his group, an imam came to them and was trying to answer questions.
Yeah.
And one of the guys got up and he said, listen, anything you say is a lie. You can try to justify it, but we know you're lying. We know you guys are secret cells. We know you have a plan, and we know that everything you say isn't the truth. So there's nothing you could say here today to change our mind. You're our enemy.
How much of that do you think is cognitive dissonance, where they know that these people couldn't possibly be this crazy, and they're actually that arrogant?
I mean,
are they genuinely convinced that every Muslim is a secret spy?
Yeah. That conviction is in when you feed hate. I usually think people who are
limit. There's no bounds to people's stupidity, is there?
No, there isn't.
Quite amazing.
But the stupidity comes. I think it's we can't even blame stupidity. I think a lot of people, they don't have a purpose in life, and there's a void in their lives, and there's someone that they want to blame.
Look, I love this
pointing fingers on another group.
This is a really humanistic and genuine and probably realistic view that everyone is kind of has a gap in their life and something that needs to be filled, information that they need, consoling that they require in order to kind of look at the world from a sense that's actually what the world is actually like, right? To educate people. But at the same time, I kind of hate to just really excuse people all the time in saying, oh, they're just not they don't see it, like, right? They're not exposed to what it's like. It's not their fault that they grew up in
I'm not gonna take
eastern
away
suburbs.
The fault. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's their fault.
We're in the world of like enlightenment. We can figure out that there are different views. We just don't want to listen.
Yeah, if you don't want to listen, that is something that's still a reflection of you.
Yeah.
But I mean, on a humanistic side, it's like, well, why don't you want to listen?
Yeah,
it doesn't justify it,
though. That's the case to everyone has their scenario and why they did evil things. A
Again,
murderer is still a murderer
despite
the situation,
if
which is probably really bad.
Yeah, so
it probably explains exactly why they did evil things. You can explain everyone's situation, but it doesn't make it. It's not like none of it was in their control. At some point, everyone has control, or most people have control of their decisions, and we have to think then.
Right,
why
you can't get away with murder because you had a bad.
Because you have a bad childhood. At one point where you're thinking consciously of your decisions and what is right and what is wrong. That something bad to you was bad. Why would you think naturally that it's normal to do it to others if you're being told that it's not what people want to done to them?
100%. So then, what is the case of people who are so radicalized? And I'm gonna use that word radicalized because it's not used enough for groups like EDL.
Okay.
For because they're radical.
Any extreme ideology, any person who's extremely into what they believe and they don't believe anyone else is right. No, I don't care about your opinion. It's my opinion or nothing at all.
To the point where
that's radical. That's the point.
I would identify radicalism as if you think that another group, that you think a whole group is guilty of something and that they are lower or lesser than you, and or they deserve, to be hurt or killed solely because they're part of that group. Yeah, you're a radical, right? That's right. Or unless you're a surfer and you're radical.
Yeah, you're pretty radical,
bro.
Radical.
Hey man, I use that all the time.
That's radical. Yeah.
Yeah, those
terms. There goes the word radical.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? There goes the word radical. We can no longer use it for something cool. Radical.
Yeah, radical.
And now it's
hey, bro, I still use it for that.
Extreme.
I mean, yeah, but
extreme radio.
Radical Muslims. We should start a skating crew.
No, there are shows that.
Hey, have you seen that video of
the guy skating?
The guy skating, and it's radical Muslim, and he's wearing a thobe, and it's so good.
Yeah. We need more of that. That's positive, I guess. I think
it's
when
just
words,
breaking it,
when words are being given this power to become negative, so negative, like the word radical, in
Yeah.
association with Muslim. So when you put radical Muslim together, they will become the boogeyman. It's really cool to see like a guy in a thobe riding a skateboard.
Yeah.
You know, that's the way you break these things down.
The stereotype, the
The
stigma.
the stigma.
Yeah.
So I
And
feel
think-
like we're trying to, just to come back earlier to what we were saying about film and things that socialize how we perceive,
Yes,
the
please
world.
let's talk about film.
we know, we're just trying to
Film is
deconstruct.
so powerful.
Film
Society.
film is what the media and the masses are using to control your minds, people. Because
Yes.
film
Is that why
is-
you're a filmmaker? Because you want to control my mind?
Partly.
That's fine.
I just want
can
you to
control my
believe
mind.
in
We're
me.
trying to create a new narrative. I
in
mean,
me.
you know, speaking of the fact that it's no coincidence that we're 3 in this room.
Right.
If you
It's a
look
lucky
at
number.
it's a good number, 3. If you look at the idea of where we all come from, I mean, we all come from minority groups, A, but B, we're all very creative, and we're all people who seek out education or seek out higher learning, and seek out a way to change things through a creative process, be it writing, be it film, be it music, be it
Yeah,
art,
man.
whatever it might be, we're using it. And I think
Just the
I-
passion, you know.
I think that's one of the most powerful ways. Dropping bombs on people does not get rid of extremism.
No.
Does not get rid of
Dropping
terrorism.
bombs creates extremism
Yeah,
and
it does.
terrorists.
You know, in Iraq,
Don't want a war? Stop fighting.
in Iraq before, and Al Mayahi being an Iraqi,
Yeah, that's right.
you know, in Iraq before Saddam
I am
Hussein
from
was
there.
taken down.
Yep.
There was in their history no recorded terrorist attack. Period. There were no terrorist groups. There were no terrorists in Iraq.
But Saddam was terrorizing all those minorities.
it's
so
like-
that- I'm
it's
not gonna
classic
speak of-
imperialism.
Saddam, yeah.
Classic
But what I
Saddam
mean
was
by that is,
another
in the
level.
vacuum of getting rid of this tyrant,
Yeah.
all of a sudden all these groups came.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
if your idea of
I mean, he
resolving
was
an
a
issue-
tyrant, though.
Oh, I'd say that's why I call him a tyrant. I'm not saying that he was good.
Just maintain stability.
All I'm saying is that if you look at it in a sphere of, if your reason for taking him out was to create peace in the land,
Yeah.
and the outcome of that was an astronomical number of terrorists,
Yeah.
then you failed.
But I
War
mean,
is a
didn't
failure.
they fund those people,
is a
bro? They
failure.
funded them. They gave them guns. They gave
Yeah,
them,
they trained
you
them.
know what
They
I mean?
created
Like, they
the
create them,
terrorists. They
and
didn't
then,
just create the vacuum. They
and then
created
who
the
suffers?
disease.
Who suffers? It's all these little Iraqi kids, bro. It's these kids that are trained to become
Well,
little militant men.
yeah,
that,
yeah.
And you know what? They don't even fight with guns. They just strap bombs on these little kids and they go to that building.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they
Right.
use them for war,
You
bro.
know,
Like it's so interesting. Sorry to interrupt.
No,
you,
go
because like women, like say for example, Muslim women who haven't done nothing, like they're coming in and they're trying to get out of say Mosul, right? And they're trying to get to the safe zone, which is where the Iraqi military right now is fighting ISIS.
Yeah.
And they're like wearing niqabs, which is the
whole covering.
Yeah, the coverage, and like they literally like they got guns on them, like take it off, or you can't come this far. I'm sorry, you know, it's crazy. Like
Yeah, because there's that. Oh my
because
god,
they're
that
using
fear.
that to.
But I mean, it kind of
it makes sense.
understandable. It
though.
makes sense.
Makes
And
sense.
like they don't
In
want it to be that
In
way. They're like,
circumstances,
I don't
yeah.
want to put a gun
No,
to you,
like,
but
yeah.
I have to because I can't see you, and it's too safe to let anyone come through here without
Yeah.
them being identified.
dangerous.
And
because we're-
usually,
yeah.
bro, usually those same
Too
women,
dangerous.
I've heard this on the TV, those same women, they go in and they're like, oh my God, thank God you guys are here. You don't know what they've done to us. You don't know what they've made our people like do. You don't know what's happening. Like, you know, it's just like people are suffering. And then there's people who live here who don't know nothing,
Yep.
and they start blaming it on other groups. Like, no, it's for example, like it's the Shia. Oh, no, it's the Sunnah. No. Bro, back home, those people are trying to work together to get
Yeah.
ISIS out of
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Precisely.
And
It's so strange
You know,
to
I
keep
understand
seeing.
what you're
this.
when you talk about what creates these radicals, you know, this is a big thing in the government now.
Yeah.
How we de-radicalize and stuff like that. And I think it's so interesting. People think it's norm. Road rage, for example, is norm. Someone cuts you off,
how you
and
gonna-
people are no. I just want
Yeah.
to use this as an example. People, when they're on the road,
Yeah.
and somebody cuts them off, they'll get mad angry.
Yeah.
Some people will even get out of the car and want to fight you, right? In that instance of anger, that rage, and that when people talk about it, they brush it off like, yeah, everyone gets road rage.
Yeah.
So we'll accede to the fact that people can get angry over something as petty as
It's
driving.
traffic. Yeah.
Yet we look at places where, and this is a fact, where in Iraq, In order for the U.S. Army, in order for them to get information, one of the techniques they used to do is they would take young boys, 14, 15, 12-year-olds, and they would rape them in front of their mothers. They'd put them onto a table and they would rape them in front of their mothers to force their mothers to give information that they think that their mothers had. Now, if you don't think that doing something like that to a family or even to a town, and you don't even have to experience it, you just have to hear about it, isn't going to turn you a little crazy.
Yeah. What
do we expect of humans? If I'm a human being and I think about being a human being.
If that happened to me, I would become a radical.
I would go insane in a moment. Just like when someone close to you dies and someone belittles that or someone degrades that or someone says, I'm happy that person died, that would anger you, drive you mad.
Like you were saying before. And then there's people on this side of the world that are going, yep, do that. Go kill him.
I feel like...
And then it justifies why these guys are coming in and like trying to blow themselves up. Like it's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, so that's the thing. It's like, okay, we have to... That's why I take the human side and I say we have to be humans for a second and think 100%. If you really want to stop terrorism and radicalization, then look at the root of it.
Yep. Stop creating a situation for someone to get radicalized and then getting frustrated as to why they get radicalized.
Exactly. And then as a society, if we really concern ourselves with humans, so I'm going right back to humanity. If this is all really about humanity, if even all of these new laws and all of these stuff about, we got to watch out for the terrorists, the big boogeyman, and all of this stuff is about taking care of people in your country, then why are we not tackling? Why are we not funding? And why are we not talking about? And why on the front page of our newspapers are not the actual things that are actually killing more of us than the boogeyman, than the terrorists? Yeah. Domestic violence. More people die from domestic violence than a terrorist attack anywhere. Yeah. Like, in the West, more people die from drink driving. Suicide.
Young people are most likely to die from
drug
suicide.
Abuse. I mean, like there were legitimate.
Yeah, and that seems to be on a rise. Suicide, bro. Like the other day, I'm at the station, and like, I've had this at least like a few times this year, and I'm just like, someone else is taking their life.
I mean, we have higher rates of people.
You're waiting for your train, and someone's taking their life. Sorry, we got to figure out a way to get you your trains. It's like, man, that's crazy. Like.
And I hate to bring up this point. I need to bring up this point, but it's one that kind of makes me feel bad a little bit. And it's that we have more veterans coming back and having high numbers of them dying from suicide than we do have Australian soldiers dying on the battlefield. Right? Like by tremendous numbers, by like multiple
why
times.
Do you think?
And you got to ask yourself why, without kind of disrespecting those people who have sacrificed their lives unwittingly. And as much as I think a person who joins the army tends to be an idiot, not all people who get involved in military are aware of the situation they're putting themselves in. Not all people realize the repercussions of the power dynamics that they're shifting in the world. They often just think they're doing the right thing, and that's how it all works.
Nothing wrong with defending your country.
Nothing wrong with defending your country if you don't realize an offense is not a defense.
Yeah, right. So they come back home.
And they come back home and they can't live with themselves. A lot of it has to do with the lack of support that's provided for them. But for them to be destroyed and crippled in that way, there must be a lot more than just what they've done. You know what I mean? Or what they've seen. It's the situation. It's not feeling right with what you've done.
Yeah, it's recognizing that this isn't exactly what it was made out to be.
Like for millennia, soldiers have been proud to lose their lives. I mean, I'm not saying like we should be proud to lose soldiers. I am against war as an idea in totality, but if this is what's going on, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that maybe we're not necessarily the good guys, and I don't think that's an extreme view. I just think that's just a realistic way to look at war, because no one is
bad is just like black and white.
Yeah.
I think people need to realize that this. You hear people like George Bush come out and we're gonna fight the bad guys, and it's like
it's the lens.
I just question it. I'm not saying we are good or bad, but I question it. Why can't I question?
I'm with you. I just think
morality.
In saying that exactly in morality, I think that when we talk about good and bad, and there being bad guys and good guys, I think that that dehumanizes as well. Not you, Buckley. I mean in general, because
like, have you guys ever seen Sorry, I'm cutting you off. Like, have you seen Saving Private Ryan?
Yeah. Great movie.
You've seen that, right? You've seen the way the the way the bombs are, the way the war looks, and it's
disgusting,
just,
man.
it's terrible, right?
Why would you want anyone to go through that?
And then you go see something like that. There's this new movie. I don't remember what it was. It was about that guy, and he keeps saving lives. What's his name?
Yeah. I don't know what the movie's called, but he was hated by the rest of his soldiers.
Yeah,
he wouldn't carry a
hated by-
gun, and then because he was saving lives on both sides. And then-
Anyway, like that, it just glorifies war in a sense. You know what I mean? It looks like it's glorifying the war. Like, oh my God, I can save lives by going to this war. I don't have to take a gun.
I'm saving
you know-
lives of people that we're also killing.
Yeah, like it's
Right.
quite interesting. Like there's this glorification, and then there's this, like, just
Well, I mean,
Other side of it.
there's glorification.
and it's just it's the exact same thing in real life. There's glorification of going in and fighting these people because you think, whoa, man, it's gonna be
Purpose.
good to you go
Identity.
and help these people, free them of these terrorists, and you're the terrorist going in there, by the way, you know, and then you got the other side, and they come back and they're like, you know, shell shocked,
Yeah.
like
It is sad. And what's sad about it is that people will look at, what's sad about it is somebody who's anti, I guess, war.
Yeah.
Will look at these soldiers coming back antagonistically.
Yeah.
Like you were part of the problem.
Yeah,
Now,
you
these
are part of the
soldiers
problem.
are suffering from deep depression, and let's just say in the case of a soldier that kills themselves and they return. So on one side, the one group of society is saying you're the evil, and so they feel some kind of way. Now they, because of how bad they feel if they talk out against it, the same people who are pro-war now look at them as you're a coward and you've turned against, you're anti-patriotic. It's like these people come back to a lose-lose situation.
Yeah.
And it's glorifying. It's this idea. It starts with this glorifying.
most of these Hollywood guys are glorifying it to make money, though. You know what I mean? So
of course.
they don't really care. Like either way.
No, I don't mean the people behind the screen.
Yeah.
I mean the people.
The people, the real
Well, they
people.
kind of come back full circle now to film being used as a tool to glorify and normalize violence and war.
Yeah, man.
amount
Have
of
you
war
not
movies out there
seen
that depict-
Django? Like
Yeah.
Django literally makes you feel, in a sense, good about all these people dying on screen. But then, I mean, they're slave owners and stuff.
I don't know how bad I feel about slavery.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah,
I don't,
being
like
killed.
I'm gonna be
But I
honest
mean-
with you. I was in that cinema. My
Yeah.
hands are like, yeah, get him, Django,
Yeah.
get him.
Oh, man.
Only because they were
Yeah,
they
it's
were
quite-
slave owners.
It's interesting, though. You know
and
what
they
I
were
mean?
they were the slave owners.
They were
I'm not
evil
against
slave
you
owners.
attacking. Look, I'm not a pacifist.
Yeah, of
And
course.
I
yeah,
believe
yeah.
that any country, any place deserves to defend themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that there's nothing necessarily, attacking the actual source. If that's the only method. See, I look at war as a failure. It's a failure to resolve
an
things
issue,
in other
yeah.
ways.
Some people
Sometimes
use
it
war
needs
before
to
they
be.
have to resolve an issue. It's be
Oh,
like,
we live in an
better
age
to
where
be-
it's the first thing. You're just looking for a way
Yeah.
to go to war because there's money behind war and there's control and there's power and there's
It's really
dominion.
interesting, you know what I mean? Like, for example, another example, I love to use this one is Clockwork Orange, how it kind of, it has this ultra violence in it, you know what I mean? And
That's
it
a
isn't,
crazy movie.
it isn't glorifying ultra violence, but it's like it's showing you what it looks like, right? And it's this guy and he's beating up people, and then he takes a brainwashing program because he wants to leave jail early, and then he experiences ultra violence, you know, and it's just, it puts you on both sides, man, and it's so interesting the way that ultra violence is being portrayed on film.
What is the definition of ultra violence?
ultra violence? Is ultra violent films, like, I mean, it's
That go above and beyond.
above what it
Tarantino
actually looks
flicks
like.
It's
Okay.
like you got blood squirting everywhere.
Like
in all directions.
sensationalized
Like, bro,
violence
you know
in
that
a way.
Sensationalized,
there's a
yeah.
scene in Tarantino's film where, like, there's a lady standing, and I don't know, she's probably a waitress. She's
Yeah.
probably a waitress or something, and he's like to say goodbye to Miss whatever her name is,
Yeah.
and then she's like goodbye, and then Django shoots her, and she goes flying back, bro. Like, you can tell it's a stunt. They like literally pulled her back.
Yeah.
That's in a sense
Bam.
ultra violence, because you
Yeah.
think that's what a pistol does, you know what I mean? You're like, I
Mm-hmm.
could blow that person away with a pistol. But what a pistol really does is shoot a hole in somebody. Like, it
And
does not
rips
do
through
that,
it,
you know
yeah.
what I mean?
Cool.
It's
ultra violence.
That's ultra violent,
Right.
for example. You know what I mean?
Right. And what about the fact that
It
games
just glorifies it.
and video clips and film? You know what's so
GTA,
interesting? Okay, well, you speak
San
of GTA.
Andreas,
Okay, so
CJ from San
GTA.
Andreas.
Yeah, I'll tell you
My
an
favorite
interesting
game.
story. At one
Okay.
point, I was playing GTA almost every day. And
Yeah, me too.
bro.
right.
I
And
finished
so I
it
was
in a
playing.
week.
I was playing it, and I was kind of really into it. San
Yeah.
Andreas, I think. It was
Yes.
GTA
Yeah.
San Andreas. And I was playing that, and I pulled up at a light.
Yeah.
And I was in my car.
Yeah.
And I saw this bike pull up next to me, and the
Mhm.
bike was dope.
Yeah.
It was soap.
Yeah.
So dope, right?
Okay.
It was soap. So I go to get out of my car to take the bike.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that bike is dope. And
Yeah.
I literally go to open my door, and then I stop and think, hold up, what am I doing? Because in the game, when you just get out of the car and take somebody else's car or
Yeah.
bike, and you keep going, right? That's the norm.
Yeah.
It had that effect on me, and I was like,
In real life?
in real life, I
No,
was out of my
what?
car. That's what I'm
Crazy.
saying to you. I was in real life in my car, and I went to open the door
To just take the bike.
to
and
take
just
the
like,
bike. And I was like, hold
Kick
on, hold
him
on,
off.
hold on. What am I doing? And then
This
it's just
is
like,
Grand
it's
Theft
like,
Auto.
I'm like, I gotta stop
literally.
playing this game.
man, that's some unstable stuff. That's crazy.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, if you
Oh,
keep
man.
it, that's an interesting thing. It's like they did tests, and they say that kids who play violent games are, I don't know what percentage it is, but more likely to be violent.
See, I've read some research that said that they're more likely to de-stress and feel less of an inclination to be violent because they
Yeah,
use it
that'd
as a
be
means to like
Release
exert all that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But
Like-
how interesting is it that you need to go and shoot
To
other people
de-stress.
to de-stress
What does
yourself?
it say about
Well,
humanity?
it's because I want to shoot people all the time, so
Yeah.
I kind of
I know how you
understand why playing a game like that might make you feel a bit better.
Can you quantify that statement that you just made?
feel, bro. Yeah.
Can you explain to us what you mean there? I
Ah,
want to be
stop
about.
there.
That's hilarious.
I feel like I'm being recorded.
You
and all
mean
this
you are being
devices.
recorded?
Yeah, right.
Metaphorically speaking.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
why is it that it makes you feel a certain way? I guess like what is it?
What's society? Well, I mean, does
Well,
society,
it's something. It's I think to do with feeling empowered, and it could have something to do with like
Can I stop you there? Because you just said something really, really important.
Yeah.
You said that, but Amayahi, you said, why do you feel the need like to shoot?
Yeah.
And in a game.
Yeah.
And you said because it makes you feel empowered.
That's probably
real
something to
life
do with
too,
that.
bro.
I don't
And-
think it
and-
necessarily makes you feel empowered.
No,
because
no,
you
no.
might feel empowered to shoot people.
Yeah, I just mean that one of the things I've always thought about people who do get radicalized and go over is when I said about purpose, is this idea of empowerment.
Yeah.
One of the things that I noticed in the videos, you know, when you see a couple of the guys, some of the guys that left this country and they went over to Iraq and Syria
Yeah.
to fight with ISIS.
ISIS
and-
supporters.
yeah. And they make these videos that they send back. And you know, they're standing there in the middle and there's all of the soldiers next to them with the guns and they feel really empowered.
Yeah.
Yo, those
And they
ISIS
feel-
videos, they're
I
shot
mean, I wouldn't
really
take my
well,
San
man.
Andreas
Yeah, shot really
empowerment
well,
as
yeah.
far as like ISIS empowerment.
No. Even would I. But what I'm saying to you is I kind of, there's a correlation here where people who feel, it's interesting that they use these tools. ISIS who obviously have great PR.
They have
Um,
some great editing tools.
great
you know
everything,
what
you
I
know.
mean?
I wonder if
They-
they use Premiere Pro and just.
How does that conversation go down? You know what I mean? So this idea, and when you hear the rhetoric that they spew, the rhetoric is a lot less to do about religion and a lot more to do about humiliating the enemy and having control and power and dominance. And for me, when I hear that kind of stuff, it to me says more about this human idea of them feeling that they
The fact that there's a battle where terrorists can humiliate us or us feel humiliated by them, and that they have an effect on our emotions, and we're having this discussion. It's like, again, yeah, we don't negotiate with terrorists. Like, why do we care what they think of us? Like, why are we giving them a platform to have a feeling so we can react to it?
No, of course. But why do people feel the need? Why does that?
Which
why,
is-
why are they incumbent on each other? Why
Which
does
isn't
one
saying that it's
person
kind of
feel-
dehumanizing a terrorist, but I feel like that's kind of necessary to an extent when it's after the fact. Once a person's committed terrorist attacks and we can't do anything to stop it, there's a level of being like, okay, you're kind of irrelevant right now. We don't need to hear from you whatsoever. You just
No,
need
we
to
don't
be
need to hear
shut
from
down.
them at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, when somebody, why is that attracting people to it? That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that for me, I don't think it's so much about attracting them via religion as much as it's attracting them via the idea of being young and strong and powerful and being
It
something.
comes
of a
back
purpose.
to, I guess, like power and belonging.
And that doesn't have to do just with ISIS. You can take EDO. You
Yeah.
can take any right-wing group. You can take people in this country.
Yeah, tell
there are
someone-
racists in this country who feel empowered with the idea of blaming another group of people and beating them. The scum of the earth that killed Nebra,
Yeah.
may she rest in peace.
Yeah.
He felt empowered in that moment by taking a baseball bat to a girl, a 17-year-old girl. What, that's about power. I mean, they say rape isn't about sexual desire as much as it's about power.
And to empower people, make them feel like they have a place and a position of importance, you first have to disempower them. You have to make them feel disempowered, like something is taken away from them, an opportunity, a freedom, a right, something that they deserve is taken from them, and they have to identify a threat and target that threat and target all that fear and hate and be like, that's your problem. If you eliminate this person, you will have power and we will give you power because this is the person that's causing you the problem, or, creating this false image of you being somehow on a path to success or happiness or heaven. And it fills that void for you. But he goes, without it, you can't be complete. And this is the cause of your disempowerment. You know what I mean? Your disillusionment.
I do. All right, let's talk about something else.
It's crazy,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
Let's talk about I wanted to kind of talk about, you mentioned earlier the struggle, and it's the one thing that we kind of share, and we're talking about
Talk about the
empowerment.
struggle.
But ways of communicating the struggle and manifesting the struggle in a way that can be fucking progressive, excuse my language.
Yeah, Abubakr, you said it. You said that about power. When you take away people's power, or you take away something that people identify with, that's when they feel like they need another way, right?
Yeah,
But being able to have a way to talk about your struggle or express your struggle is a way, isn't it?
It's a form of empowerment. It's an amazing form of empowerment because it can establish what it is the problem is. A lot of the time, people can't just tell you what's making them upset, what's wrong in their world.
I think
Whether
like you do that, like it's interesting. Like we're talking about empowering right now.
Yeah.
It's like to empower. How do you empower? You do yourself to the best of your ability. You know what I mean? Do yourself to the best of your ability.
You do you, boo.
I mean, I know, like, for me, like, fighting is an interesting thing. Like fighting, not fighting as in, like, fighting with people, but, like combat. Martial arts. Like, and I always look at Conor McGregor, and I'm just like, this guy went from having a dull, like, living on what is it? Centrelink, for example. He's living on Centrelink payments.
Welfare.
And then, he just starts working at what he's good at, and he just starts making more money and inspiring more Irish people, more money, more Irish people,
empowering all people.
And it's weird, and it gives these Irish people a sense of pride, like they're backing him up. Nobody is supported as much as this guy by his people, bro.
I don't know about that.
I mean, who do you know that's supported that much by his people?
Right now, or just
right now? In any sport.
I would say Mayweather.
I disagree with that.
I
mean,
not by the.
Hold on.
Not by the.
Listen.
What about LeBron James? He's pretty supported by.
Spent a lot of time in America.
Yeah.
And around quote unquote his people.
Yeah.
And
it is.
Let me tell you something. I've watched the Pacquiao Mayweather fight in a room full of quote unquote his people.
Right.
And there's nothing he could have done wrong that would have made them go for Pacquiao. Nothing. He could have pulled out a hammer and hit him on the head, and they would be like, "Yep, that's Mayweather styles." You know what I mean? Because it's irrelevant. You're right.
But what he's saying is that Conor McGregor and essentially can unite a nation of people into the sport.
Yeah.
In
the same way Pacquiao, in the same way Pacquiao, like the Philippines, like they love him.
Exactly.
You know what they say when a Pacquiao fight is happening, the crime rate completely, like no one, like everyone, everything
how
stops.
Interesting is that?
It's like, I'll rob you later. Let's just watch the fight first.
Hey, we all gotta watch
It's like, bro, I gotta.
You're midway into a house robbery, and you're like, let's watch the game. Let's watch the fight.
It's like you break into the house, watch the game, and then like finish robbing their shit. And the game finishes.
So
it's interesting though. You
so
know what I mean?
So creatively.
But him doing that has inspired people, and that for sure is gonna inspire more Irish people to come into. There was never an MMA Irish fighter.
Right.
He was the first to do it, and then as soon as he did it, he went up, he won a championship, and he was like, you know what? I'm gonna win another championship, and he won 2 belts, and now he's fighting the biggest. He's fighting the biggest fighter, like of all time. For me, Floyd Mayweather is the best.
Not of all time.
Not of
of
all
our time.
of our
Of
time.
our time,
Yeah.
I mean,
I'll give you
I
that.
like
Of all
comparing
time?
them. He is up there though.
He's
you
up there
know what
though.
I mean,
He's quite
bro?
up there.
He's
He
definitely
is.
What
top
was it,
5.
43-0?
He's 49 and 0.
49 and
So if he beats McGregor, he's 50 and 0.
But that's
better than like Ali's record.
But
But
that's all technicality. That's on
Muhammad
paperwork.
Ali is the greatest of all time by far. We can't really.
See, now we're
Yeah.
talking. We're
Yeah.
talking.
Now we're talking
technically.
because now technically not only is he the greatest fighter, but he was the best fighter. He was politically the most important. It's
Yeah,
all
for
relevant.
sure.
So
And
we're
that
talking
has
about
a
impact.
relevance.
Exactly, yeah.
We can talk about no sports and it's all that
No, no,
matters.
no,
But like,
it's
no,
all-
what's the
that
point of
matters.
you as an athlete
See,
if you don't contribute to
can't
society?
compare a Floyd Mayweather to a McGregor because a McGregor is essentially a Muhammad Ali in what he does.
More than a
Yeah.
Floyd Mayweather is, yes.
More than a Floyd Mayweather is, yes,
that's
yes.
true.
Not more than a Muhammad Ali
Yeah,
because
No,
he
far
just-
from.
yeah,
I don't see no
yeah.
McGregor throwing
No
a
white
Olympic
man can ever be
Olympic
Muhammad
gold
Ali.
medal, mind you, into the river. Trust me, what Muhammad Ali did in his time, I would be amazed if
Revolutionary.
anyone even comes close. Especially
Yeah.
in nowadays where people are tight-lipped and scared to get their promotion cut, to get their money cut. Muhammad Ali went to jail
Yeah.
over what he stood
quite
for. You
interesting.
won't see that anymore.
No.
Yeah.
But I mean, back to the point of creativity being a way to give people who are empowered, dispower. What's the word?
Disempowered.
Disempowered. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Oh.
Power.
Empowered.
One of the, hip hop music, hip hop culture, is something I love dearly.
hip hop.
Yeah.
That was a great form of empowerment.
Yeah,
right, for
but you look at it
minority
now,
groups.
it's so interesting what they've done with hip hop now. Like
Well, that's because it's being made into a corporation, right?
Exactly.
But when we're
It's
talking
like
about
fast
its
food
original
right
beings,
now, bro.
yeah, of course. But when you talk about its original positioning and what it did for people, and it's like, okay, so clearly, historically, we can see that the creative aspects, the creative outlets, give people power to be able to not only express themselves but develop themselves and create a livelihood for themselves.
100%, bro. Like I
So
was saying,
is that not the resolution that is being swept under the rug?
that's what I'm saying. Like
the
like
arts,
we were saying,
the
like
arts don't get back. The amount of money that goes to schooling for creative, like for art, for the arts,
Yeah.
it's like a fluff thing.
Because
we
they
don't
don't-
respect the artists.
Mhm.
they don't want
society.
people to have an opinion, bro. They don't want people to.
No, but
know,
if you take
but
away art from a
All
culture,
great cultures historically,
arts
they
survives all.
revolved around their art.
Yep. And
Because
the
art
artisans.
is culture, bro.
You know, in our
art
tradition,
isn't a product.
yeah, in our tradition, and this is one of the telling things. This is one of the telling things about historically the golden age of Islam. The philosophers, the scholars, so the leading quote unquote religious men of the time and women of the time, they weren't just people who studied jurisprudence. They were poets. They were artists. They were philosophers.
Yeah.
They were architects. They did multiple things, and most of it fell into the creative sphere, which is something that says a lot about. And this is not just within our tradition, but all across the world throughout history. Most of these people who were really movers and shakers, people who changed things for the positive, they were involved in some form of art.
Yeah.
Because, again, it can come back to the mind and how the mind thinks if you're artistic or creative. Now, we live in a society that the funding doesn't go to art.
Yeah.
That it's seen as a flimsy concept.
You just have to look at Hollywood. Where does all the money go to with films?
Here we go about film. We got Al Mayahi in here.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, all art is
Like,
culture, and
literally
film is
all
just
of
a
the
form of art,
films-
isn't it? You can think
Sorry.
about a book, you can think of films,
No,
you can
that's
think of a
all art.
documentary. It's all
It's all
art.
art. It's all art.
yes.
Yeah,
And
100%.
These are just Western forms of art, really. These are modern forms of art. And if you look at cultural, because art is culture, if you look at historical cultures that are kind of been oppressed and pushed aside, the thing that's always
Look
power
at
through
some
and stuff through
Picasso
is art,
paintings,
because
man.
you can't get rid of art. And once you try to get rid of art, it's the quickest way to remove
Dismantle.
and reduce and break down a culture, because you kind of
Art's
wither
what makes it
away at
thrive.
people's form of communication, because when people communicate, it's really that they communicate in a non-artistic way, because we put ourselves into everything we say and do. So to kind of reduce people's art to what you want it to be is cultural, slavery, cultural genocide in a way. It is what it is. And so, like, if we didn't have art, we wouldn't have these
Oliver
ongoing
Stone.
cultures, really.
Oliver Stone was saying something like that. He was
Yeah.
like, it's interesting. I have to take it to film because that's what I
Yeah,
know.
No, I was joking
Um,
around. Please take it to film.
Yeah.
Oliver
we love it as a
Stone,
film.
who made the film JFK, who made the film Platoon. You know, he's
Right.
really. I went to see him give a lecture, or not like a talk. You know,
Yeah.
and he was talking about the difference between art as a culture and art as a product.
Yeah.
You know, and he was saying that art has always been a culture. It's always been something you look at. Like, say for example, if I look at a piece of Kurosawa work or I look at a piece of Tarantino work, I'm like, how interesting. That was a piece of his time. It was a piece of who he was. But who wants to turn it into a product? It's the people who want to make money. It's the people who want to run a business. You know what I mean? Who want to get revenue. It's always been like that. Maybe even McDonald's at first started as a piece of art, and then
Yeah.
it became a franchise. That was
McDonald's started as two brothers. Who
Yeah.
created one store.
Mm-hmm.
Who created one store, and that store eventually did franchise out. But what was interesting was the McDonald's brothers. They just wanted that one store.
Yeah,
And they had a
got
silent
bought
partner
out. Mm-hmm.
who wanted to franchise, and they didn't want to. And eventually, they gave him the rights to McDonald's.
wasn't KFC like that.
No,
like
no,
the
no.
guy.
I'll go to KFC. Hold on, but they gave him the rights to McDonald's,
Yeah.
and they opened up their own because they're the originals called McDonald Brothers.
Yeah.
You know what he did?
Mm.
He opened up a McDonald's directly across the street from them. Now, mind you, all they wanted was their one store, just so they can do their thing. He opened up a McDonald's across the
This
street and multiple other ones,
motherfucker.
and ran them out of business.
Oh my god.
Undercut them and ran them out of business so that he could be the only one. And then he spread that. KFC, even more sad. The Colonel,
Yeah.
he doesn't even own his face.
Yeah. Really.
Yeah, that's funny.
They
huh?
own everything. They own how he looks.
Bruh,
Crazy.
like, yeah,
That's
like I
so
remember seeing him on like this old TV show, and he was on it, and he was talking about like, yeah, I have this original recipe that I've come up with, and it's so inspiring because he's this old man, right? And he's come up with this idea, and he's like, you know what? I'm gonna give up everything I worked for just to work on this like idea of making chicken, you
Yeah.
know? And then like,
He was really old when he gave
and
that a
now
go,
the
and he eventually
franchise is just
succeeded.
making fake chicken. I bet you he would have made some good chicken, bro.
But you know the guy who sold McDonald's or like lost McDonald's, he was apparently, he spoke afterwards and he says, I think I'm happier with the decision that I made than I would have been if I had kept McDonald's and pursued it. And also one of the Beatles who was cut off real early, I spoke to him afterwards, is like, you know what, I think my life turned out better the way it did, because what happens is, and what I was trying to relate here, is that we don't always we don't feel satisfied with what happens in our life, and
Yeah.
we deal with happiness not in the situation but perceived happiness. So
But the Beatles, man, they
But the
went
Be-
on
yeah, but,
to
like,
make
a lot of-
some of the
it's all-
greatest stuff in the world. I don't know, like,
for what I mean by perceived happiness, and I'm going to relate this to this particular study that was done in Harvard, where they got these photography students to do this really intense course, right? And they got them to take these photos, and they told them they had to take 2 photos, and they worked on these 2 photos for like the whole year, right?
Right.
And they were told that by the end of this that they had 2 options. They could send. They needed to give 1 photo to send straight away. They needed to like give that photo to the university, and the university needed to send it off to the museum straight away. It had to go, but like 1 photo they get to keep.
yeah,
So they choose 1 photo and they send that off, and it goes off straight away. And then they come back to them like months later, and they're like, "Are you happy with your decision?" And a lot of them are like, "No, I kind of wish I'd kept the other photo. I wanted to know what had happened, right?"
yeah,
And others were just told, "You don't get a choice. This is the one we take, right? Like this is one that's taken from you. You get this photo. That's all it is." And those people were quite happy with the situation that they were in. They were like, "Well, like this was out of my hand. I'm
dealt my
satisfied.
cards,
I
yeah.
dealt my cards. I dealt with it. I'm happy with it."
Right.
But
Yeah.
when you feel like, "Oh, I could have made an alternate decision.
Yeah.
I could have had a hand in like this other thing of perceived happiness that could have been different for me,"
Right.
and you fester on that. That's what makes you sad, because you feel like, "Oh, I could be happier, and I'm not as happy as I
quite
could be."
interesting. I mean, yeah, it's an interesting,
Yeah.
interesting thing. Like, you know, there's always getting dealt your cards. Like, for example, like, yeah, I don't know if this one actually works, but like, when they were making The Godfather, they were they were told like, nah, you're not getting any more money because we don't. And this is for me, this is one of the greatest movies of all time.
It is. Yeah.
And they were like to them, no, you're not getting any more money. No, this lighting looks weird. Why are you doing this? Why is your cinematographer shooting it like that? And they were like to the director. They were like to the director, Francis Ford Coppola. They were like, you're gonna get less money if you do it like this. Just know that. And he was like, screw it, I'm gonna do it like this, and he ends up making the greatest movie of all time.
I don't know about the greatest, but yes. So,
for me,
course,
one of the greatest movies of all time.
That's a similar story to Lauryn Hill.
Lauryn Hill.
Yeah, her album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. She was part of the Fugees, and so that project was very successful. And when she started recording her independent album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, the label fought her over it because they wanted it to sound like the Fugees material, and she wanted to create something different, and she had to give up a lot of like monetary value and stuff, and she fought very hard. And then the funny thing is, by the end of it, it won so many, like 11 Grammys, and what that really says is sometimes the people who have the funding don't have the knowledge or the know-how to back something. And that's what it is, though. In society, we revalue the check cutter, the check writer, more than the artists themselves.
Okay.
But the artists themselves is actually the one who can actually make the difference, make the change.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely agree with that.
But when we grow up, I mean, we grow up in a society, back to lenses.
Yeah.
What is an artist? And what is their value in society? We downgrade the value of an artist unless they are wealthy.
Yeah.
See,
Once they make money,
I don't think an artist should be wealthy.
Yeah, I don't think so. Once
look,
they
an
can
artist
create
can be wealthy
capital,
or
then
not
they're really
wealthy.
just selling a
But what I'm
product.
saying to you is, think about it. People don't respect like an artist until they've made it, quote unquote. And by making it, they only look at it as if you've made money. But they were doing the same art before.
Yeah, let's look at, for example, Van Gogh, right? Van Gogh, throughout his whole life, never made
much money.
Never made any.
He struggled from his art. Yeah,
he struggled to get his point across. Like, this is art, guys. This is the culture we're living in. Trust me. You know what I mean? This is what it's about. Like, and his paintings are like amazing. Like, they're beyond his time. He's a genius.
Starry Night.
You know what I mean? And then, but throughout his whole life, everybody was like to him, bro,
quit.
Your shit sucks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And except his brother. His brother was the only one to believe in him.
Wow.
Everybody else was like, yeah, it's good. Why is it so wiggly, though? Why is it so much like this? He's like, bro, you don't get it. This is the art of our time. Like,
yeah.
I guess he was a generation early because it was of later times.
But then later on, we look at him now and we're like, whoa, this art speaks so well of his time. And
so many people don't get the flowers.
The people
when
that
they
are
can smell
perceived to have looked ahead of their time are usually the ones who evaluated their presence with the most detail. So the ones who wrote the stories about their time and their world are the ones that we then look back after and be like, oh, these people really observed their situation and realized the life that they were living and the emotions that they were making and why they were making. They really put themselves out of the equation. And they do that because they're not thinking of this is how I want to be perceived in future and past. They're thinking of this is how the world is from now, and I'm actually trying to figure out why it is the way it is right now.
I'm all for celebrating art.
That's real art, though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? A lot of people, especially nowadays, it's content. And there's less artists because there's so much content producers. There's so much people who are trying to just create content.
Yeah.
Whereas they're not thinking about, they're not really reflecting on it.
It's a very diplomatic way to say it.
You know what I mean?
Content creators.
Hey, I'm a content creator.
We're all content creators.
Okay. Yeah.
But there is a
bureaucratic way
few
to say it.
artists. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like if you're really an artist, you're developing your form. You're consistently working on it. You're like you're wanting to capture something. You're not just trying to take photos just to upload on Instagram and be like, "Yep, this is my art." Like it's quite an interesting thing. No, and it genuinely is. We're in a world full of content nowadays. Like, and it's interesting because
overload of content.
Overload, you know what I mean? And it's interesting because sometimes some of that content can be art. Like sometimes you see a random picture and it hits you and you're like, whoa, this is really beautiful, or this is really affecting me some way. And that's what a piece of art does. It's like it's supposed to affect you in a certain way where you're like, man, I really like, this is really making me think of my childhood or some shit like that. You know what I mean?
What was your first artistic experience?
Oh,
yeah, let's get deep.
My
Where do you
first-
first feel? How were you
define that?
exposed to art?
How was I exposed to art?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, how do you define art?
What kind of art were you exposed to as a child? Was it
I
through
was-
literature?
He
Was
said
it-
he's told me that acting was his first.
Yeah, you know
love.
what's interesting is people would usually try to identify me first and foremost as like a music artist.
A rapper.
A
Okay.
rapper,
Yeah.
But
I'm
but
not a
but,
rapper.
but
Yeah.
I'm
not a
rapper.
rapper. Not a rapper, guys. Not a
Yeah,
rapper.
yeah.
But I started off wanting to be a film writer,
Yeah.
a screenplay writer, and an actor.
Yeah.
And I wrote my first script when I was in like year 5.
Yeah.
So I was like 9 or 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, film.
What was your script about?
So I wrote my own version of Batman.
Ah, nice.
right.
And,
Was he
and,
like
and
Iron
I'll tell you
Man?
why. No. He was what? Iron Man. No, he was
Iron Man.
Batman.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the reason I wrote Batman specifically was
Right.
because the teacher, because she knows artistic or whatever, she's like,
Yeah, right.
yeah, you know, you can create like a little show and we can put it on in the lesson.
Yeah.
And I was like, perfect. So what I did was I wrote this script. And that I was Batman, and there was Robin, and there was the girl. I think I'm not sure if she was just like the
girl you had
Okay.
a
but
crush
she
on.
was a girl I actually had a crush on at school.
Oh, snap.
So I wrote this whole thing around having her as the crush, the girl, so I could get to know her better.
Nice.
You know, art is a way to just try
There you go,
to
there you go,
live,
man.
right? So art for me has always been my form of expression in all its ways.
Yeah.
Drawing played a big role, but then music started. One thing that I loved about hip hop compared to why hip hop really spoke to me. Outside of the fact that for me being a person of Arab descent, poetry was always played a big role in my
Yeah,
heritage.
definitely.
So
Yeah,
hip hop expressed poetry, and it was poetry on beats, POB. So I was like, I'm all for that, and I love that. But it was the fact that it was so sincere, and then you could say what you felt, and you could express how you want, and it was speaking about struggle, which I related to. So art gave me a voice when I felt voiceless. And we were speaking about earlier before how when you grow up with a lack of identity, that can lead to a lot of problems. And so in hindsight, when I'm thinking about, well, why didn't it lead to issues for me? Maybe art is what helped me. Maybe the fact
Because
that
you're
I
always
took on
working
artistic...
on something.
Exactly.
Because you're always doing
'Cause-
something.
And
That was the same for me. I
it
grew up
gave you
around.
an outlet.
And you know, I ended up getting caught up in these situations where I was hanging out with people who were selling drugs, and I was hanging out, but I never did it because I was like, I think I can do something with this art. I can see something being, and I don't make amazing films. I'm still
Yeah,
working.
You, do.
You know what I
you
mean?
make
I'm
really good work.
I'm sharpening my
He
blades.
exists
You know what I
himself
mean?
So much, man.
I'm sharpening my blades. I'm getting ready to make something.
Metaphorically.
Yeah, like metaphorically, yes. I do believe all
Why do
great
I
art
feel?
is like
Why do I feel the
swordsmanship.
need that every time you guys say something that can be taken in a violent way that we
Like
have
I'm
to?
gonna blow up. Like
Yeah,
metaphorically, I'm gonna
metaphorically
blow
speaking.
up. Like,
That in itself, I'm sorry, I really didn't want to cut you off, but we have to bring that point out.
Yeah,
That-
right.
That's again because we're all colored people.
Yeah,
and we
right.
feel a need in society to like ensure that you get.
Yeah,
we're
like
not-
that video, bro. Like I sent Matuse a video of this cop, and he was just searching this dude, and he
This
did it in
police
the
officer, yeah.
he did it in the right way. He was like to him, okay, just take your
The guy had a
put
gun
your
on him
hands up.
legally on a bike, and the officer knew he had a gun. He had kept his hands up, and the officer went about.
dealt with it, yeah, and calmly, and they shook hands, and everything went well. But you know what's interesting is like he had to like tell him, he's like to him, I'm reaching for my wallet now, like
Yeah, and it's in his
don't
pocket.
shoot me, you know.
And,
Have you
and the
seen
fact
another
that we
clip of,
applaud
like,
that we applauded that's the way that the officer did his job, and like, yes, that's how you meant to do it.
Yeah.
We shouldn't need to applaud something that you do. It's like I go to work, and let's say I'm a janitor, and I wipe the floor, and everyone comes out and they take a video of me wiping the floor, and they applaud me saying, "Now that's how you wipe a
That's
floor."
it, yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
that's what I'm meant to do every day, and
Yeah.
it shouldn't need to be applauded.
how about that clip when a police officer pulls off the student and
Puts 10 bullets
and
into him?
they're this like Caucasian appearance young uni student, and he goes into his car and he just like opens the car, randomly goes to grab something and pulls out some bowling pins and starts juggling. And he just, just juggles away his white privilege into freedom, and the police just like let him go.
Oh
You
my
could
God.
not have a black man
my
randomly go
God.
into their car to grab something after the police
That's
are like
hilarious.
trying to arrest them. It's like there's black people that lay down hands up with a patient of theirs saying, "Don't shoot. I'm just helping
I
this
remember
person."
seeing. I
And
remember
they'll just
seeing.
shoot them. And
I
he asked the
remember-
police
yeah,
officer, "So why did you shoot me?" He goes, "I don't know."
Yeah, I know that
They
one.
just-
I
just
know that
did.
one.
I
I know
just
that one.
like,
Because
I've
he's
seen
been-
that one
he's
with
been-
the,
he has a double standard in his brain
That-
that teaches him
Yeah.
that this person is a threat. Naturally, is a threat,
Yep.
and that's the problem.
Or
when
that
you
girl
keep
that was like,
feeding
"Why
and
did you
perpetuating
shoot
it.
my boyfriend?" Like,
Yeah.
What was his name? What was the man that? What was the name of the man that?
I
died?
don't-
Castile?
I don't
What was his
remember.
name?
Philando Castile? Is that
Flander
the-
Castile.
Yeah.
It's just
It's just
like when
such
people,
a
when
strange
people-
video because he was like,
it's
"I'm
important to-
reaching." He's telling the officer, he's like, "I'm reaching for my wallet," and the police officer's asking him for ID, and then he reaches and he's like to him, "Don't reach for it," and then he starts putting bullets into him,
Mhm.
and then they found out
And
that
gets
he
away
didn't
with
have any guns, he didn't have any weapon on him, and the cop gets away with it. But
Man,
the
this
cops
shit drives me mad. I don't understand how these things happen, and we're like, no, you can't get angry, and you can't have a reaction. You can't say that Black Lives Matter. Stop killing Black lives. Stop forcing us to get this angry, because it's not like we've created the situation. We're trying to find a way out. And I'm just kind of tired of being like, we're gonna find the right dialogue and have the right discussion. How can we just keep talking about this shit? People keep dying. Like it's
Talking obviously
absolutely
isn't
normal
resolved.
to get angry and want to like fight back, because talking isn't getting us anywhere. Talking is always used against us, and
Yeah.
we're constantly being lighted, for lack of a better term, for everything that we say, because we're black people and because there's institutional racism that we don't want to make sure that the institution takes responsibility for. We have to find a way out of it. Why can't the institution itself stop this oppression of black people, and wouldn't get so damn angry about it? I think. I don't know.
No,
No,
you're
you
right.
do know, and you're right.
Maybe
Like, I
the
mean, it's crazy,
institution
man.
is built on the fact
It's
that
crazy.
it's doing its job, and maybe that is its job. I mean,
It's
division
like
of
you
people
like
is-
we do
Not
like
the world I voted. That's not where I want my taxes to go. That's not the world I'm happy with. Like, I'll do everything in my power. And this is what we're doing. We're trying to create this kind of narrative. This is why this is so damn important, that we get to sit here and be like, no, we're not going to just kind of continue this normalization. We've talked about normalization a lot, right? Socialization through film, through media, through TV. If we continue their dialogue, if we let it be and we don't be like, no, this is actually the problem. We don't want Australia to invade Iraq. We don't want Australia to invade Syria. I don't want my taxes to go towards
how do we
this.
do
I'd rather
that?
my
Though?
taxes
How do we?
by continuing to rally our people and keep talking about it and saying
There
we
is power in
disagree
people.
and
There
voice
is,
and
huge
words.
power in people.
So they have their words, we have
100%.
our words, and we gotta
Words lead to
make
action,
our words
positive
more
action.
meaningful and like reach a broader audience, because like we have to keep stirring the pot. We can't just let it settle, because
I
they'll
agree.
just like think we gotta shift the way things are being normalized. We gotta have African and black people talking on radios every day to a lot of young people. We have to have young people listening and engaging us. We have to have people that will otherwise be on the streets getting radicalized and not feeling that they have a
100%.
place,
You know what
coming in and
needs to be
speaking and saying, you
normalized?
need to stop hurting me.
Bro, it's crazy. Like, it's crazy. People literally think, like, when I was in high school, people would be like, they would offend you. Like, they would think it was offensive, like, to say, yeah, but you're black. Yeah, but you're black.
Yeah.
And you're like, what do you, so what?
Yeah.
Like, why are you trying to use that as an offensive term? Like, but that's the thing that they were fed. Like, no, this person is less than you. This
Yeah.
person is less. It's
Yeah.
fucked up. It is.
And people accept that. How quickly can a child be like, you know what, that's just how
They're
the world
sponges,
works.
bro.
No, no,
As
They're
a white person, I
sponges.
get to be better. Like, no, that's not the truth.
But that's because you're a sponge, and if this
They
idea
learn
of
from
the
their
other,
forefathers,
yeah,
bro.
but if you have the idea of the other, people look the other as a negative human trait. Human beings tend to they want to try to find fault and blame in blaming somebody else. So when kids grow up, they always want to try to push the blame away from them. They'll always find a means. Now, if you're giving young people an actual whole group to blame, they're going to take that on board, especially when you perpetuate that through a constant barrage of imagery, be it through film or through media reports, through writing, through tweets, through whatever it is. If it's constant, it becomes normalized and real. It becomes questionable, and that's what the thing is. we live in an age where
Yeah, but
freedom of speech is
question.
fine.
Do you think it's then it becomes okay for us to become radicalized, the minorities to
No, I don't think it's okay for anyone to. And I think what it is we need to. You were saying something, Abubakr, that was very interesting. You said that we need more. You said we need more Africans or black people on the radio or having outlets. I think we need more of any demographic that lives in a society. So we live in a society that's quite multicultural, and there is a lie here. The West perpetuates this lie that the West is the first multicultural place. It's not true. History is filled with multicultural places.
The first democratic place either.
Exactly, yeah. But if we live in a place that is multicultural, and it is, and it isn't actually meant to, we're actually not the minorities.
Yeah.
As in, there is no minority in a multicultural place. It's shared equally. Now, if it's shared equally, what needs to happen if you want real change is you need the people that are in power, A, and the people that have influence, which are usually those who have access to what influences, which is media.
Yeah, media. Yeah.
You know, film,
The medium,
music,
think of it
the
as that.
mediums.
Yeah.
That's where the power is.
Right.
They should all be represented in a diverse way.
Yeah.
It should be law that you know, it has to be multicultural. You cannot have a society that has white faces on the TV all day, but
Yeah,
the society
100%,
is diverse, because it separates people from being able to connect to their society, but being able to have a voice. So it's very easy to blame a group of people for doing something when you don't get to hear the voice back.
I think like it's got to be a bit more serious as well. Like you got to create content that isn't a joke. You know what I mean? Like you got to make something that's really telling people what this is and what it's like. Like when they make films about, like when they make Iranian films, they make them about the culture and how the culture is, like, you know, how it is and how they treat others and how they live together. And that really is a reflection. That's the art, you know what I mean? But when it becomes a piece of shit that you're just trying to sell to people just to be like, here, put this in your face and eat it, you know what I mean? I believe that's content. Like, that's just something that they're trying to feed masses, and that's what brainwashes people.
Give them cake and give them circus is the old Roman saying.
What does that mean?
What it means is, you know, if you want to keep people, if you want to control people and have power over them, then you have to ensure that you give them food to keep them, you know, and you don't give them good food.
Yeah.
And you give them the circus, which is entertainment, but not entertainment that's informative, but rather entertainment that is, how do I explain it? Entertainment that's going to keep them in an illusion and keep them entertained and keep them away from it. So if you look at it in the modern term of things, you have genetically modified food and fast food, and that's promoted constantly. Yeah. Not only promoted through like avenues of media, but it's promoted in the pricing of it. So it's cheaper. And so the people who that tends to attract are people who cannot afford anything else. And that's usually poor, minorities, low socioeconomic, those who actually have something that they would need to stand up and say, right? You keep them down. And then the other thing is circus is entertainment, but folks entertainment. So if they're always watching video clips that perpetuate this idea that women are sex objects and men only have value in the amount of money that they have or car that they drive or jewelry that they wear, then you're keeping people chasing this false illusion, and it never gives them enough time to turn around and say, hold up a minute.
Yep. They don't reflect.
I don't agree with what's going on in my country or my society. Wait up a minute. I feel like we should make a change, because we should and could make a change, because we are any country is built up on the backbone of the people of the country.
Right. Yeah.
So the people of that country should really decide how that country should live and look and be
quite
and
interesting.
thrive.
It's quite interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
So if those people actually weren't blindfolded by this pursuit of something that they don't need,
it's the illusion.
Then they can stop and say, you know what we really need? We really need to tackle,
this and that.
We need to tackle these social ills. We really need to tackle, domestic violence. We really need to tackle where our taxes are going and why these major corporations are getting tax cuts. And we need to really tackle what's 100%. Being used, what's going on with these land masses that are being sold off to other places just so they can take advantage. You know, the interesting thing is when Trump pulled out of the French summit, the Paris summit, his justification for it was that it wasn't economically viable for their so money was more valuable than the actual existence of the earth. So something that has no intrinsic value is more valuable than the only thing that has value, the extra place where we live.
Talking about nature is more valuable, and if something is the creator and like the resource for all that you use, why would you want to deplete that? Why wouldn't you want to nourish that?
Yeah.
Why would you not want to plant the tree that gives you the
some people are
strawberries?
just
Why do you feel that you
fucking
need
crazy.
to sow your
Well, I mean,
strawberries
that's
and
the
then
thing.
destroy the plants because
Obviously,
you
we cannot
have enough
rely
money?
on those in power.
Yeah.
And you know what? That makes sense because politics.
Yeah.
Let's break down words. We're about to wrap up, but let's
Politicians
break
are
down words.
policymakers.
No, let me tell you. Let me break down words.
I-
Poly means
yeah.
poly means multiple. And what is tick? It's a bug. What kind of a bug is a tick?
It's a
It's an
natural
insect that you
thing.
never want on you.
Yeah.
Politics tells you exactly what they are.
Yeah.
They're just a bunch of leeches,
Yeah. Right.
right? Just sucking away at you.
Yeah.
They're not human, right?
Yeah.
In that way. So, words tell you a lot.
I mean,
I'm not even mad at the politicians. I'm not mad at anyone. What I'm saying is we need to wake up, and if we want real change,
100%.
human beings can do the change. Human beings can create the change, and we need to create change. And this is one way where we're creating change, by creating a new narrative. My name is Matuse Peace, and
Abubakr Mahmoud on your radio waves.
And Al Mayahi, Mohammad.
and this is Extreme Radio, the podcast. This is our first episode. If you did tune in, we really appreciate your time and space.
Thank you for listening. Peace and love. Black power. Power to Africa. Eid Mubarak, everyone.
Peace in the Middle East.
Peace in the Middle East.
Hey, peace to human beings and
Love
aliens
no
alike.
war.
Yeah, that's 100%.
All right. We out.